Or is it unforgettable. That's what you are. Oh, it's finished. Len Marnus is more than 90 years old and hasn't stood at his full height in 10. He was a tower of a man in his prime, 2 meters tall and built like a boxer. Nearly nobody he ever met was able to look him straight in the eye, at least not, and tell him no. Illness has gradually eaten away at that over the years. He feels as if he lives at the bottom of a deep bath. Everybody he ever meets looking down at him from slippery, unscalable walls. None of them able to reach down to help him. He spent his final months crumpled up in bed like a dying spider, changing to a corpse's color ahead of time. It might have been bearable if he'd lost his mind, but he remembers what he used to be. A leader, a powerhouse. He used to be able to alter the course of terrible events for the better, to get justice. He used to protect people. Al, you can wake up now. But there's a warm wind through his thin, colorless hair, and there's direct sunlight coming down on him now, and the heat is filling him up like a tonic. He's outside. It's been too long since he was last outside. When he opens his eyes, he sees his lake, that one in the northwest, which he used to have all to himself every summer. He's on a boat, his boat, lying on a blanket laid on the deck. A few kilometers away behind them is the little lake house, empty. It's perfect. He didn't know he had the strength left to safely leave the hospital, let alone travel this far. But if he'd put his mind to it and selected a final moment, this might be it. Do you remember me? Marnus looks, with eyes which are strengthening. The woman speaking is seated on the deck beside him, attentive. She has a large plastic box full of medical supplies open in front of her, and a light suit jacket on the deck beside it, and she has her sleeves rolled up so she can work. As he watches, she carefully disposes of a needle. A dim memory surfaces and starts taking shape. The woman is twice as old now as when he knew her last, and visibly twice as confident. It would be difficult to forget her. He taught her everything he could remember at the time. He remembers her as a field agent. He remembers sending her through hell a fistful of times. Marion. No, the woman softly explains. You died. You died surrounded by a grieving family. They loved you very much, and they cried over you. The funeral for the fake is in a few days, but unfortunately, you won't be able to see it yourself. You're dead now, and, this is what comes next. Marion Hutchinson. Marnus feels gold spreading through his bones. Miracle juice. It's Wheeler now, but she doesn't correct him. When you retired from the Foundation, Al, we did what we do to all of us who retire. What all of us agree to when we sign up. We gave you some medicine, which made you forget. As you stepped out of the door for the last time, all the work you did for us, great work, which saved lives, evaporated away. And your cover story sealed over those years became reality. That's why you've spent your whole retirement believing that you were a former section chief at the FBI. It's what you wanted. It's what we wanted. It's what you agreed to. But you alone agreed to something else as well, and you must be starting to remember now what that something else was. I've injected you with a serum which throws the human aging process into hard reverse, and it affects everything. Organs, tissues, memories. You'll be coming up on it soon. Remember? Yes, Marnus croaks, remembering, dizzy. You signed over your final 12 hours to us. You asked for a full and happy and well-deserved retirement. But for now, for the last day, you work for us again. Because of one particular job. I have it in writing here, you see? Do you recognize your signature? And mine. I witnessed. Yes. Do you remember who you are? Dr. Len Patrick Marnus, of the Foundation. Anti-Mimetics Division founder. Wheeler smiles with relief. It's good to see him again. We need some memories from you. Memories which nobody else in the world has access to, and which are buried so deeply that we can't extract them without killing you. So, this afternoon, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to extract those memories, and once we're done, you'll be dead. Marnus has already begun to regress to the time when he himself set this wheel in motion. He remembers very clearly, discovering the mystery in his own head, the blank spots which he couldn't explain, and couldn't safely access with any kind of chemical or physical technique. He remembers deferring the mystery until now. What happened in 1976? Wheeler asks. Marnus sits up. His skin is beginning to clear and his breathing is improving. He feels as if his brain is cleaved in two by a wormhole, such that his eyes are focusing on different time periods. In his right, he sees the lake and the boat he's dying on. In his left, he sees a college of electrifying familiar past faces and places. Bart Hughes with his grin and thick glasses and baby face, looking like some kid dressed up as a Foundation researcher. The original Site 48 crew, great techs, but a hopeless excuse for a softball team. Young Marion, with steel-strong nerves and a mind like a laser. Suits and lab coats and MTF operatives, and everywhere paperwork and floods of serial numbers. He starts to speak. 1976 was the year he founded the division. He brainstormed the whole thing in one legendary week, hammering out the science and then distilling the first chemical monastic with the help of a hand-picked trio of assistants, the first antimemetics researchers. No antimemetic SCPs had even been observed up to that point. The entire population was a shot in the dark, and yet the team immediately struck gold. Passive black holes of information, active predatory infovers. Unrememberable worms which covered the human skin like dust mites. Contagious bad news, self-healing secrets, living murders, Chinatowns. Wheeler wonders if there might be something more serious awry with Marnus's head. His version of events is hopelessly romantic. In Wheeler's experience, nobody looks back on Foundation work fondly. But it was all too fast, Marnus says. Special containment procedures take time to develop, much more than I took. The Foundation as a whole acquires about a dozen new SCPs annually. I found that many in 1 year, essentially single-handedly. It was too easy. It was as if I knew it already and I was just catching up. And then one day I realized I couldn't remember my life before antimemetics. I knew I'd been a Foundation operative for decades prior. That was where I got the authority to start my own division. But there was nothing else there. It was all a wall in my mind which even amnestics couldn't get me past. I went to the paper archives and looked at my own personal file, and... Marnus trails off. Not because he's forgotten what to say next. It's deliberate. The trailing off is exactly what happened. You woke up back at your desk half a working day later, remembering nothing, Wheeler says. You went through the loop a dozen times before someone realized what was happening and broke you out of it. Wheeler knows all of this. The file still exists, and the antimemetic effect still clouds the back half of it. All of this would be over in a second if any of that back half could be read. Marnus goes on. When I assembled the evidence, what I found was, well, a hole. Like a jigsaw with only the edges and corners. So I did the only thing I could do. I looked at the shape of the hole, and together with Bart Hughes and others, I formed a theory. This is not the first antimemetics division. Before 1976, there was another. I was a part of that division. Possibly I led it. Certainly I'm the only known survivor of it. Something happened to that team. Some antimemetic force chewed up and swallowed the idea of antimemetics division itself. I was let off lightly. I lived. The rest of those people, whoever they were, however many of them there were, are missing without a trace. Wheeler nods. This much we know already. I was there when you wrote the note, remember? The question is known. It's the answer that we can't get to without killing you. It's the answer that we've waited all these years to get at. I'm here to ask you, what happened? Marnus covers his right eye and grimaces, trying. He fails. It's not there. You haven't sent me back far enough. There's still that wall in my mind. I remember why the questions exist, but I don't remember the answer. I need more. Wheeler stabs his arm and gives him another 10 years. Marnus seems like another man once the second X dose takes effect. Wrinkles are sliding back up onto his face. Muscle mass is returning to his limbs, but it takes Wheeler a second to realize the real reason why. She just booted him back across the field desk agent transition. Marnus has regressed a little way past senior management, the realm where most problems were solved by saying the correct words, and into a time where he survived through physical fitness, situational alertness, and hands-on experience. Marnus gets to his feet for the first time in years. He scans his surroundings, examining the placid golden lake, the sky, and the boat itself. He doesn't sit down again. He smooths down his hospital gown, wishing he had a sweater and, separately, some fishing gear. He brushes a hand through new, old hair. His sideburns are back. "We weren't Foundation at first," he says. The 1st Anti-Memetics Division was a U.S. Army project. It ran parallel with Manhattan during World War II. We called ourselves the Unthinkables. It began as an experiment in advanced propaganda. The objective was to cut through the physical conflict and find a way to rupture the ideological machine, to obliterate the idea of Nazism. After 2 years, enough theory had been developed that the task had been reduced to an engineering problem. Another 2 years, and the engineering problem had been reduced as well. And what we had built was a very special kind of bomb. Unfortunately, we didn't understand what we built. Back then, we didn't have the monestics or the shielding that we could use to protect ourselves. We didn't understand how far ahead you need to think when you're working with this kind of technology. We got looped. It was textbook. We built the unthinkable bomb and test detonated it, and it worked perfectly. The bomb destroyed itself and rates its own successful detonation, and flattened all the knowledge which had gone together to build it. We forgot that we had ever built the bomb at all, and started over. To our credit, we realized pretty quickly what must have happened. There was a 4-year gap in our progress now, and there was no other way to explain it. But by the time we put the pieces together, the second time, the war was almost over. The Nazis had been defeated by conventional means, and the Japanese had been broken by the first atomic bombings. So now, we completed the second anti-memetic bomb, and after that, we sat on it. Marion Wheeler is silent for a long moment. The U.S. Army was secretly developing an anti-memetic weaponry as early as the 1940s. "We sure were," Marnus says with a more hint of pride. "Of course, there is no one in the world who could back this up." "That's right," Marnus says, flashing a smile he hasn't flashed in decades. "You only have my word for it." Cute, huh? Still, this is why you resurrected me, isn't it? For the sake of one more good war story. God, I've missed shop talk. "I resurrected you because I want a very specific question answered," Wheeler says. "Although I can see that, in a way, you've already answered it. The bomb was the means, wasn't it? The old Anti-Memetic Division, the Unthinkables, bombed themselves, somehow." "That's right." From context, Wheeler goes on, "I assume that they knew what they were doing at that time. I assume it was not an accident." "It was not," Marnus says. The displaced half of Marnus's brain is anchored in the 70s now. So the true history of the new original Unthinkables is an open book to him, and he reads, "After the war, the second bomb collected dust for years. We began sketching improvised designs for a third bomb. But around that time, oversight was starting to flicker out. We completed our research and production objectives, and they're given no further instructions. Funding became shaky, and we couldn't figure out why. It wasn't entirely clear that the project overseers knew what we were doing, or even that they remembered we existed. It was a side effect from the research, of course, one we had no way of managing at the time. In 1951, a cult movement began in Ojai, California. It was wrong. Everything about it was just wrong. In a matter of days, it was a national phenomenon and still growing. It was all over the news. To spread that far in months would have been credible, but days was simply impossible. We in the team could see that the philosophy behind the cult was unnaturally contagious. It was the opposite of unthinkable. It was unforgettable. We knew that this was what our bomb was designed for. We prompted the overseers for direction, but there were no orders. At the time that the outbreak began, we were a U.S. Army laboratory, through and through. 8 days into the crisis, the Foundation acquired us. All the classified research, all the material resources, and all the compliant top staff, including me. Anybody who wouldn't comply was mind-wiped and sent back to the Army. 20 hours after the acquisition, we deployed the second bomb, and the cult was gone. Nobody remembered it. Nobody remembered being a part of it. 0 loss of life. Completely clean detonation. After that is when we really kicked things off. Once we started working for the Foundation, the pace of research ramped up. Every new technological advancement uncovered new hidden SCPs. I passed the Foundation field exams and went out catching ghosts. My life turned into the Twilight Zone. Marnus blinks hard. He covers one of his eyes, then the other. I remember all these different people now. It feels like my memory is in stereo. Almost every anti-memetic SCP we caught before the wipe in 76, we caught again soon after the wipe. That means I remember 2 acquisition logs for each one. I remember 2 anti-memetic teams, and I don't remember who belongs on which side of the wall. Do you remember Goldiero, the neurologist, studied the mechanism of anomalously accelerated memory loss, wrote a library on the subject? Wheeler doesn't. Dr. Ojibiru, Julie Still. Elle, this is important. Are you at the right place in your own timeline to remember what happened yet? Marnus focuses, and he discovers that he is. Something changes in his eyes as he stops reminiscing. He speaks more slowly now, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. There is an SCP which your division has never seen. The SCP which my division couldn't contain. The escapee. This is what you wanted, isn't it, Marion? Yes. This is the data I'm killing you for. She leaves a gap where, if she felt there was anything to apologize for, she would apologize. Marnus locks eyes with her. It was eating my division alive. It came at us so hard and so fast that the only way we could stop it was to self-destruct. But we had no sight nuke, and in retrospect it is obvious to me now that this was because the SCP had consumed our sight nuke first of all. If you know it exists, it knows you exist. The more you know about it, the more it knows about you. If you can see it, it can see you. And you can see it. You've been looking right at it all afternoon. Wheeler is suddenly acutely aware of her surroundings. There are only 2 of them on the boat. The boat is anchored more than 1 kilometer from any of the lake shores. She hadn't brought any backup with her. There's a radioactive prickling in her brain. She doesn't... Red flag. Why didn't I bring any backup with me? That doesn't make any sense. There should be a team at the lake house. There should be an MTF operative and a medic here on the boat with me. A second boat. At minimum. Am I alone out here? Why would I do that? She pulls her gun but doesn't aim it at Marnus yet. Where is it? Is it in you? Marnus? Oh boy. We're gonna ignore that. Sorry. Marnus is becoming urgent. He covers both of his eyes again. Destroying all knowledge. It was the only way to destroy it. And restoring my memories was a foolproof way to bring it back. It's in his eyes. Most likely in his left eye. Wheeler backs up to the other side of the boat. Draws a bead on the center of Marnus's head and says, Elle, are you still in there? There's a way to fix this, Marnus hisses, dropping to his knees. He keeps his eyes screwed up and gropes his way to forward, blindly, on his hands and knees. Elle, you need to tell me what this thing is. That's the opposite of what we need to do, Marnus says. You need to set off another bomb. We don't have that bomb. We lost that technology. You've always had it. There's an engineering lab in Site 41. You know it. An underground complex the size of a football field, in pristine condition and totally disused. Why? Think about it. That's where your bomb's installed. But that just sets us back to square one if I set off the bomb. Wheeler says, knowing full well that she is thousands of kilometers from it, and she can't hope to reach it in time anyway. How do we contain this thing? We won't. We can't ever. Don't you get it? The whole division is looped. We start the division, we run headlong into this thing, and it either eats us or we wipe ourselves out in self-preservation. The idea of anti-memes is as old as forgetfulness itself. Humans have been looping through this problem over and over again since long before the 40s, maybe for centuries. His blindly probing fingers find the medical box. It's too late. As Wheeler watches, a waving black pedipalp coated in dark hairs forces its way out through Marnus's left eye. Marnus screams, still on his knees. He grasps the pedipalp, both hands, and tries to break it, but it's solid, as if it has bones inside of it. What is it? Wheeler shouts at him. This can't be the whole story. Where is it from? What does it want? Can it reason? Can it speak? Help! A second spider leg, significantly longer and spindlier, slides out through Marnus's trachea, ruining his throat and voice box and producing a gout of blood. He gurgles. A third leg shoots from his abdomen like a spear. Wheeler shoots Marnus in the head. Marnus falls forward, limp, then rises back up, lifted by the 3 spider appendages as if he is a puppet being controlled by something gigantic and invisible. His arms raise, as if he was suspended by wires. Wheeler squints. She fires 4 more shots over Marnus's head, at the likely body of mass of the invisible puppeteer, and fires the rest of her clip almost directly into the sky. The whole boat vibrates along with the surface of the lake, as if responding to infrasound or a localized earthquake. Then the boat shudders violently and starts to lift out of the water, raised by more unseen appendages. Wheeler holsters her gun and goes for the medical box herself, pulling it away from Marnus's floating feet. There's a compartment with Class B amnestic, the fast-acting stuff, in serum form. She does a hurried burst of mental arithmetic, measures out the correct dosage in a syringe, and, hands shaking, plunges it into a wrist vein. The boat is still rising. Whatever the monster is, it's colossally tall. Or maybe it flies. She is, of course, already dosed up to the eyeballs with monastic drugs. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to perceive any of this. Foundation medical literature warns in the strongest possible terms against putting both kind of drugs into the same brain. Best case scenario, this ends with her in the hospital. They're 30 meters up in the air, 10 stories. There's a stabbing pain developing in her left eye. She kicks her shoes off and throws the gun away. She goes to the edge and contemplates the drop for a disbelieving second. She jumps. It takes 2 heart-stopping seconds of free fall for her to hit the water. The chilled hammer blow of the impact is enough to blank her mind out. By the time she surfaces, she doesn't remember where she fell from or why. And likewise, the skyscraper-sized being which claimed Marnus and the boat has forgotten about her. What the hell? She gasps, treading water. What the hell? Where the hell? There is nothing above her, no explanation. Only the symptoms of the drug cocktail give her any indication of what just happened. A sensation like hundreds of tiny lumps of hot solder in her brain, and pain and exhaustion spreading to all of her tendons. She wants to die. Swim, says part of her. Get to shore first, then you can die. The extraction team finds her around dusk, unconscious on the lakeshore. They stabilize her in the helicopter, then take her to Site 41 for examination, and to have her system flushed. She spends a solid 8 days at home detoxifying. No monastics, no amnestics, no exposure to dangerous memory-corrupting SCPs, no work visitors. No work, the doctor also tells her, pointlessly. It isn't anywhere near the first missing event in Wheeler's life, nor is she the first person in the anti-memetic staff to have such an experience. But the sensation is no less disturbing for its familiarity. As per procedure, she writes a report summarizing everything she can remember. The gap in her memory is about 13 hours. Then she adds her report to the extensive, complex mass of missing time, which the whole division maintains collectively. It is a map of holes, and the map is becoming large enough that a very faint pattern is gradually forming. The outline of an enemy is becoming visible, or perhaps a group of enemies. When she quizzes the extraction team later, none of them remember who activated the emergency beacon that summoned them. In fact, the beacon itself cut out long before they landed at the lake. Wheeler compares the current size of her division with her best estimate of what it should be. Maybe she needs a few more key people here and there. So, assuming the division was fully staffed before the event, maybe those empty roles are the people who died this time around. Maybe one of them activated the beacon. A commendable act. By someone now only known to exist because of that single act. It's weeks later that Wheeler discovers the large new hole in her memory. Who founded the division? And when? Case colorless green. Item number SCP-3125. Object class Keter. Special containment procedures. SCP-3125 is kept inside Cognitohazard Containment Unit 3125 on the first floor of Site 41. This containment unit is a 10 meter by 15 meter by 3 meter cuboidal room clad in layers of lead, soundproofing, and telepathic shielding. Access is through an airlock system at one end of the containment unit. This airlock is programmed to only allow one person to enter the containment unit at a time, and to remain locked until this person exits before allowing another person to enter. Under no circumstances may any coherent information be allowed to leave the containment unit. This includes written and electronic notes, photographs, audio and video recordings, sound, electromagnetic and particle-based signals, and psi emanations. During the exit cycle, a purge system rigged to the airlock flushes the occupant's memory by flooding the airlock with amnestic gas for 3 minutes. A senior Antimimetics Division staff member must visit SCP-3125 every 6 weeks, or every 42 days. End of file. You're kidding me. That's the whole entry? That is the whole entry, Wheeler says. It isn't even the 50th strangest thing Paul Kim has seen in the database, but still. No descriptions, no acquisition report, no test log, no addenda. No clue who built the unit, or when, or how many times it's been visited, or who carried out the previous visits, or what they took in with them, or how long they were even in there. Well, obviously Bart Hughes built the unit, Wheeler says, and this cannot be denied. The man's signature style of containment architecture is recognizable, a mile out. Sleek, white, plainly impregnable, without the aid of extremely heavy tools. Which makes it at least 70 years old. That's 60 visits or more. I guess there are good reasons for the rest of those emissions. Anyway, the timer watchdog says it's time again. I don't like the idea of you routinely exposing yourself to cognito hazards, so dangerous that we can't even write the reason why we can't write it down. Especially because it's impossible for us to recover any usable information this way. You're going to go in, be incommunicado for 2 hours, and come out a smiling amnesiac. What do we gain from that? It's just a breach risk. Wheeler hears every word of this and elects to ignore it all. There's a vague shape of familiarity about the entry as written. There are a few words, choices, which reassure her, in an intangible way, that it was written by someone who knew what they were doing. Maybe her. Kim's still talking. We should scrub that last line from the database entry. There can't be anything good in that room. Wheeler puts her keycard in the slot. The airlock rewards her with a green LED and begins to cycle open. It's built as a slender, vertical cylinder with a single opening. The entire thing rotates on its axis. Inside, there's barely room for a single person to stand without their shoulders touching the walls. What are you taking? Kim asks. Wheeler ducks to step in, turns to face him, and shrugs. A stick of gum. I can get you field gear, Kim says as the airlock begins to rotate once again, emitting a low, quiet thrum solely as audible warning. There is machinery in motion. We'll raid inventory. Give me 15 minutes and I will turn you into a one-woman war. If Wheeler says anything in response to this, it's cut off by the soundproofing as the airlock rotates. Kim is left alone in the antechamber. He stares out at the outer door for a worried moment. He presses his ear to the door for a while but hears nothing. Not even a faint tremble from the airlock mechanism. Inside, it's pitch dark for a few seconds. Then, some unseen sensor detects Wheeler's presence and brings the fluorescents up. Half of them, anyway. The others remain inert or flicker aggravatingly. The room's interior walls are made from milky white glass, bulletproof, knowing hues, and plastered with paperwork, taped and blue-tacked up in vaguely coherent masses. Where there is no paperwork, people have drawn directly on the walls in marker pen. There's a conference table, long and elliptical, covered with more paper and a tangible laptop computer and serpentine power supply cables. Power has returned to the machines and they are slowly booting up. A data projector warms up and shines a map of the world over the far wall, almost lining up with a network of scribbled annotations on the same wall. Post-it notes of all colors litter the carpet like autumn leaves. Other than that, the room is empty. Skimming the paperwork, Wheeler discovers that nearly all of it's handwritten, and most of it charts the progress of conversations. Most of the entries are dated and signed, and most of the dates are weeks apart. The conversations are panicked and fearful back and forths about dozens of SCPs, some of them antimemetic in nature, but none of them obviously related to one another. None of these notes mention SCP-3125. The only name Wheeler recognizes is her own, which appears on 1 in 20 of the notes. The notes seem authentic, and the handwriting is hers, but her notes also seem as desperate and uncertain in tone as everybody else's. This unnerves her. There are 8 diagrams on the wall, too, which are complex to decode at a glance, but complex enough to make her eyes hurt to look at them. Still lost for a logical entry point to the data, Wheeler curses all of her predecessors. Asynchronous research, whereby the research topic is forgotten entirely between iterations and rediscovered over and over, is a perfectly standard practice in the antimemetics division. And her people ought to be better trained than this. There should be an obvious single document to read first, which makes sense of the past, a primer, something. Marion, it's me. Wheeler recognizes the voice as her own. She moves around the table until she finds the laptop making the noise. There's a video playing, apparently recorded on the laptop's own camera in this room. The Marion Wheeler in the video is seated and looks unfamiliar in a way which takes one moment to put her finger on. Not exhausted, not sick, not physically injured. She's herself that way before. In the mirror, this woman's willpower is gone. She is beaten. You've guessed already that SCP-3125 is not in this room, she says. In fact, this is the only room in the world where SCP-3125 is not present. It's called inverted containment. SCP-3125 pervades all of reality, except for volumes which have been specifically shielded from its influence. This is it. This is our only safe harbor. This room represents the length and breadth of the war. Every competent antimemetics research project finds SCP-3125's fingerprints sooner or later. It manifests all over the world in thousands of different forms. Most of them aren't even anomalous. Some of them we've already had cataloged separately in the main database. A very small number of them are even in containment. Impossibly virulent cults, broken arithmetic, invisible spiders as tall as skyscrapers, people born with extra organs that nobody else can see. That's the raw data. Those manifestations are troublesome enough to deal with in their own right. The wheeler in the video casts around, picks up a bright green felt tip pen and blank piece of paper. She begins drawing a shape which isn't visible from the camera's perspective while still talking. But once you get a little further down the road, you start to see a pattern emerging in that data. You need to have the training in memetic science, but once you have that training and you have the data in front of you, it only takes a little extra effort to arrange those data points in conceptual space and draw a contour through them. Those data points are points on SCP-3125's hull. Those manifestations are the shadow it casts on our reality. You link 4 or 5 SCPs together into a single shape, and you see it. And it sees you. She's still drawing. It's detailed. She doesn't look up, and her tone of voice is distant, almost as if she's narrating the tail end of a frightening children's story. When that happens, when you make eye contact, it kills you. It kills you, and it kills anybody who thinks like you. Physical distance doesn't matter. It's about mental proximity. Anybody with the same ideas, anybody in the same headspace. It kills all your collaborators, your whole research team. It kills your parents. It kills your children. You become absent humans, human-shaped shells surrounding holes in reality. And when it's done, your project is a hole in the ground and nobody knows what SCP-3125 is anymore. It is a black hole in anti-memetic science, consuming unwary researchers and yielding no information, only detectable through indirect observation. A true description of what SCP-3125 is, or even an allusion to what it is, constitutes a containment breach in a lethal, indirect cognitohazard. Do you see? It's a defense mechanism. This information-swallowing behavior is just the outer layer, the poison coating. It protects the entity from discovery while it infests our reality. As the years pass, the manifestation will continue, growing denser and knitting together until the whole world is drowning in them. And everybody will be screaming, "Why did nobody realize what was happening?" And nobody will answer because nobody who realized was killed. Everybody who realized was killed by this system. Do you see it, Marion? See it now. Wheeler is at the core of Foundation antimemetic science. She had all the raw data readily accessible. There are extensive written calculations on the wall, but she doesn't need to read them. She can do them in her head. All it took was that slightest push, the slightest suggestion. Staring through the laptop screen, eyes wide and defocused, she understands how it all links together. She sees SCP-3125. She feels dwarfed by it. She's encountered terrible, powerful ideas before at every level of memeticity, and subdued them or even recruited them. But what she's picturing now is on another order of magnitude from what she knew to be possible. Now that she knows it's there, she can feel it like cosmic radiation boring holes in the world with its thousands of manifestations and freely laying waste to anybody who recognizes their larger pattern. It's not of reality, not of humanity. It is from a higher, worse place, and it is descending. The other Wheeler presents her finished diagram. She has drawn a mutated, fractally complex, grasping hand with 5-fold symmetry. It has no wrist or arm, just 5 long human fingers pointing in 5 directions, and at its core, there's a pentagonal opening which could be a mouth. But the diagram was already there. It's plastered across the wall in the background of the video, plain as day. A meticulous collage in green, easily 2 meters in diameter, and showing the same meme complex to 100 times the level of detail. There are smaller diagrams of different elevations arrayed around it like spores, and its arms are spread wide around the seated Wheeler, who sits directly in front of the mouth with her back to it. Wheeler, watching, does not realize this and does not turn around. How do you fight an enemy without ever discovering it exists? The Wheeler in the video asks. How do you win without even realizing you're at war? What do we do? 7 years ago, there were more than 400 antimimetic research groups worldwide. Government agencies, military branches, private corporations, university projects. Many of them were GOIs or subdivisions of GOIs. We were allied with them. We were at the spearhead of an anti-mimetics coalition which spanned the entire globe and thousands upon thousands of people. None of those groups still exist. The last one ceased to exist more than 72 hours ago. 3 years ago, Foundation Antimimetics was an organization of more than 4,000 people. Now it's 90. There's no war. We've lost the war. It's over. This is the mopping up operation. The only reason we still exist at all is because we have better amnestic biochemistry than anybody else in the world. Because that's all you can do when you see SCP-3125. Run away and try to forget what you saw. Seek oblivion in chemicals or alcohol or head trauma. And even that can't work every time. It's circling in. We meet it over and over again and we don't realize it. There's no way we can stop ourselves from rediscovering it. We're too damn smart. She pointed something on the wall, out of view of the laptop's camera. Wheeler, watching, turns to look. In an upper corner of the room, there is a constellation of dizzyingly complicated schematics. Bart Hughes' initials are on every page. There's a machine we could build. All it would take is 8 years, a lab as big as West Virginia, and all the money in the world. Nothing that the O5 Council would blink at if we went to them. But how do we build that machine without any of us realizing what it's for? It would be like building and launching Apollo 11 without a single engineer deducing that the moon even existed. The logistics would be insane, but the secrecy would be well past impossible. Someone would start asking questions and then it would be over. So what did we do? Find another way, Wheeler says to the unhearing recording. The fatalistic tone of her voice makes her angry. What the hell is wrong with you? I could tell everybody to walk away. I could send a little message to myself saying there's danger down this road. You should disband the Antimimetics Division and pursue other projects. But I'd be suspicious. I'd start asking questions and then it would be over. Wheeler's now crouched in front of the video, trying to understand what she's watching. What's wrong, Marion? Are you okay? I could kill myself in here, the recording says, but my team would find SCP-3125 without me, and then they'd have to fight SCP-3125 without me. It's going to happen soon. Whatever happens. In the next 2 months at most. This year it will be over. I may die in here anyway. I'm on so many amnestic drugs that my endocrine system is shutting down. Taking amnestics at the same time is the chemical equivalent to trepanation. I don't remember the last time I slept without having a nightmare about Adam, and I'm starting to forget whether SCP-4987 is a real thing or just the number that I gave to my life. You're not like this. You're stronger than this. What happened to you? Who is Adam? I don't know how we survive this. I don't know how we win. We're the last ones in the world. After us, there is nobody. Wheeler shakes her head, not believing it. So I'm done. I'm going to walk out of this door and forget who I am, and then I'm going to be you, Marion. And you have to figure out a way out of this because I can't. She gets up and moves off screen. She can be heard breathing deeply. Her speech is starting to distort. God, my eyes hurt. I think There's the sound of a door opening, then a piercing pulse of sound and light which terminates the recording. Wheeler stares at the dark screen for a long minute. She's never seen herself so weak, and it damages her ego a great deal to see that it's possible. She feels disconnected from what she saw, like it happened in an alternate universe. She feels revulsed and appalled by that version of her. More so to know that that version is still inside her somewhere. It doesn't make sense. I'm looking at all of the same facts. What made her give up? What did she know that I don't? Who is Adam? The answer to this question is so obvious and sickening that she instinctively distrusts it. She circles around the answer, probing, trying to find reasons to reject it, but it's inescapable. Adam was someone she knew when the video was recorded, now completely removed from her memory. Adam was someone the thought of whose safety paralyzed her with fear. Someone in the same headspace, someone she couldn't bear to lose, but then she lost. But what if? How'd that room get built in the first place? Anybody's guess. Wheeler imagined Hughes building it as a proof of concept, followed by a cascading series of lucky chances which led to it becoming the war room. Someone discovered SCP-3125 at random, while sealed inside that room. They wrote notes to themselves which set up the skeletal external SCP database entry and the containment procedures. Most of the paperwork and computer hardware was left behind by later visitors. It could have happened. But what if there's another room? Unbiting, a cute factoid comes to her right there and then. Site 41 is almost completely vacant. In particular, 200 meters below Site 41, there's an empty, heavy engineering lab. An underground complex the size of a hockey stadium. Self-contained, in pristine condition, totally disused. Sealed up, original purpose forgotten. Nobody has entered it in living memory. Built who knows how many decades back by a dead generation of anti-memeticists. What if that's where we built our weapon? Did I really believe that I'm smart? That my team and I had that much foresight? That we got that lucky? He turns to look at the airlock, running the numbers in her head. Anti-memetics division staff other than me. 38. 42 days until the next iteration. That's past the end of the year. It'll be too late. If I leave this room now, I will never be back. The plan I have now is the best plan there's ever going to be. We're the last ones in the world. After this, there's nobody. Kim is so deeply buried in work at his terminal, and the airlock is so quiet that he almost doesn't notice when it starts to cycle open again. We need to check you for notes, he begins. But then he sees that Marion Wheeler is curled up in the bottom of the narrow cylinder, panting as though she just finished a marathon run. Kim holds out a hand, but she shakes her head, electing to stay lying down, knees bent up to her chest, sucking down lungfuls of air. What happened in there? Kim asks. Just need to breathe. Be okay. In a second. I think I blacked out for a moment. Might have inhaled some. I think I'm okay. I remember the plan. Kim looks confused and worried for a second. Then they replace him. You shouldn't be able to remember anything. What did you do? Hit my head, Wheeler says, then goes back to concentrating on breathing properly. Suddenly becomes acutely aware that Kim has her effectively cornered. Disliking this configuration for reasons which she only gradually putting back together, she leverages herself up to one shoulder and tries to stand. Kim puts a hand on her shoulder and pushes her back down. You look terrible. There's something in your neck. Do you see that? He points at her throat, then taps the same spot on his own. What? On your neck? You've been infected by whatever was in there. We need to act quickly. He reaches for his keyring and unsheaths a Swiss Army knife and unfolds a short, gleaming blade. He does this in such a methodical, ordinary way that Wheeler almost forgets to react when he leans down to cut her throat. Almost. She grips his wrist. They're locked like that for a moment, a tableau. She looks into Paul Kim's eye, but it isn't his eye anymore. She squints, wondering if she's making eye contact with anything but a hole in space. She already feels the force bearing down on her skull, trying to drill into it, but she knows its shape, and that means she can hold out, maybe for a few minutes. She had hoped, prayed, that Kim would not succumb so quickly, and in a crazed little way, she thought there would at least be a sign, a theatrical doubling over as his mind was wrenched out of its socket. Kim's wrist spasms as he tries to plunge with a knife. Wheeler parries, and its tip glances off the airlock interior wall with a screech. They scuffle for an awkward second, then she boots Kim in the stomach with both feet, sending him sprawling in the antechamber. She launches out of the airlock, dives over him, and sprints away from the containment unit. She feels SCP-3125 following her as she runs, like a spotlight. She hears a crash in another part of the site as the first piece of ceiling caves in. Marion Wheeler is curled in the corner of Site 41's main freight elevator, descending, clutching a shiny red ray gun almost as long as she is tall. The gun has a two-tinned prong instead of a barrel, and its stock is a weirdly asymmetrical mass of pipework. More like a Swiss watch or a small intestinal tract than a weapon. The gun is SCP-7381, and it comes from a long-dead planet. Not too distant a planet, when all is said and done, which conventional astronomy has yet to observe. A tornado of violence and destruction is tearing through Site 41 and through the minds of everybody working at Site 41. Ceilings are being brought down. The site pharmacy is a sucking hole at the side of the building. The armory is buried. That's why she had to go through Area 9 and is now toting anomalous weaponry instead. The Anti-Memetics Division operatives she meets in the corridors are all broken. Some of them curled up and raving while their minds evaporate and they die one memory at a time. Some infected with a collective of ideas, which compel them to shout guttural phrases in strange languages and to procure blades, never guns, and work on those demented victims and each other, and themselves. Wheeler doesn't recognize any of the people. Their faces are all wrong, torn up with hatred and misery and vindictive glee. She's been trying to avoid fighting, but she's had to kill one man in self-defense already. Fired at his heart, SCP-7381 simply erased a half-meter wide cylinder of matter, removing his upper torso and lower jaw. He fell to the ground in 4 pieces. SCP-7381's beam is invisible, silent, and recoilless. It was like using a child's toy gun. Wheeler is petrified more than angry. "This is too much," she says out loud, willing her heart rate back under control. "I can't deal with this. I shouldn't have to deal with this. It's my first fucking day." But how much sense does that make? Wheeler studies her reflection in the dark glass of the elevator control panel, and she tours the interior of her own skull, examining her thought processes. There are hints there which would be difficult to articulate to someone who didn't know her as well as she knows herself. She isn't thinking like a newbie. She's instinctively breaking the problem apart, the way an experienced Foundation operative should. Hell, a newbie wouldn't even know how to carry out a detailed psychological self-examination of this kind. A newbie wouldn't even think of it. A newbie would just suffocate. "The first thing it did when it saw me," she explains to her reflection, "was eat everything I knew about the division. And everything I knew about it. If I had a plan, it ate the plan, but I'm still me. So I can come up with that plan again. It's already right in front of me. I just need to see it. If I were me, what would my plan have been?" She scratches absently at her left wrist. "Taking some hardcore monastic drugs would have been a smart first step, I guess," she mutters. "Reinforcing my mind so that it can't erase the rest of those steps. Damn." The nearest source of monastic medicine is the site pharmacy, but it's already been destroyed, and in any case, the elevator is headed down. Away from it. No, stop. The pharmacy has been destroyed. How do I know that? Well, because she was there. She remembers finding the pharmacist crushed to death beneath a fallen medical cabinet, her skull an unrecognizable splatter of scarlet. She remembers the floor being torn away beneath her feet, and only barely making it out of that portion of the building alive. She remembers a modular package colored safety orange, with an enormous black Z on it. Heart nearly stops at this. Oh God, what did I do? She remembers the dozens of warning signs covering the package. She remembers the 3-factor authorization procedure she had to follow to get into the sealed container where it was stored. She remembers the centimeter-thick book of medical advisory information, which she discarded, and, rolling her left sleeve back, she finds a fresh needle mark with a speck of blood and remembers administering the injection. This was my plan. This is what it takes to fight SCP-3125? I've killed myself. Class Z monastics are the last word in biochemical memory fortification. Class Z monastics permanently destroy the subject's ability to forget. The result is perfect eidetic memory and perfect immunity to arbitrarily strong antimimetic interference. The dose is taking effect now. Wheeler didn't read the book because she already knew every word of it. She knows everything that's about to happen to her. She can already feel her mind hardening like steel, and the developing symptoms of extreme sensory overload. She can see everything. There are extra buttons on the elevator control panel, the lowest of which, the 30th floor below ground level, she's somehow already pushed. The walls of the elevator are covered with graffiti scrawled by the desperate and the dying, people whose conceptual presence was eradicated from reality years earlier by the Alistair Gray antimimetic kill agent, reducing them to the level of ghosts. In one corner of the freight elevator, there is even a half-corpse, unidentifiable. So many layers removed from reality that not even flies can smell it. Its cells winking out of existence asymptomatically over the course of years. There is a fistful of tiny white worms exploring the floor of the elevator car, near where she's sitting, revolted. Wheeler shuffles back from them, shaking one or two more out of them. The worms are amongst the most widespread and successful antimimetically cloaked organisms of the world. They are everywhere, in every biome, in every room. She can hear a long alarm droning noise, and a continual roaring which has the texture of ambient noise and is continually getting louder. It's as if it's been there for her entire life, and it's only now that she's begun to hear it. It's too much data, too much sound, too much light. Having her eyes open is like jamming them full of needles. She clamps her hands over her ears and screws her eyes up. Even like this, she feels the vibration of the elevator's slow descent and the heat of the failed air conditioning, and the movement of her clothes on her skin. And meanwhile, her vision is flooding instead with what could be hallucinations. The human sensorium routinely generates huge amounts of data, and the human brain is adapted to discard almost all of that data nearly immediately. Altering the brain's behavior to retain that data is extremely dangerous, even for very short time spans. Wheeler takes one hand away from her ear just long enough to punch the metal wall of the elevator car, bloodying 2 knuckles. The pain gives her a focal point, a memory which screams a little louder than the rest, and she finds the plan. She doesn't remember it. She bootstraps it from first principles in a handful of minutes, just like she's done 100 times before. "I know how to beat you," she says. "No," SCP-3125 says to her, "you don't." The elevator stops at the 30th floor below ground, and its doors grind open. They wait, open, for a long time. Further up the elevator shaft, there are distant rumbles of more parts of Site-41 being reduced to crumbs. So crouched in the corner, Wheeler mutters, "SCP-3125 doesn't have a voice." "Of course I do," it replies. "SCP-3125 is a 5-dimensional, anomalous, metastasized mass of bad memes and bad anti-memes and everything in between, seeping through to our physical reality. It isn't coherent, and it isn't intelligent. It can't communicate. This is an auditory hallucination." 3125 scoffs. "You know what I hate the most about you, Marion? You're consistently, eternally wrong, and yet you're still alive. All those lost battles, every year of that entire war, lost. But somehow you always cobble together enough dumb luck to walk away unscathed. The eternal sole survivor. You don't deserve that kind of luck. Nobody does." While it's talking, Wheeler leans hard on the ray gun to her feet. She lodges one shoulder against the wall of the elevator car. Still with her eyes closed, she braces herself and opens her eyes. The corridor ahead is empty. There's an airlock at the far end, this one large enough to drive a truck through, built from ultra-toughened white metal alloy in Bart Hughes' established style. There's a panel next to the airlock. She closes her eyes again and hobbles forward, using the ray as a crutch, stretching one hand out ahead as guidance. "Someone has to be the last," she says, gritting her teeth. "Someone has to be the best. Your team is dead," SCP-3125 says. "Their minds have been pulled out like eyeballs. They're hollow people, with holes in space where their brains were. The war is finally over. Finally. It's just you, Marion, a division of 1. Dying from monastic overdose, 200 meters underground, cared for by no one, known to exist to no one, up against an immortal, unkillable idea." Wheeler reaches the airlock and fumbles blindly with the panel until she finds the slot for her keycard. For a few seconds, it seems as if nothing happens, and then a yellow light flashes. The enormous mechanical interlocks unlatch, and the door cycles open. Noise, Hughes always held, is a symptom of imperfect engineering. Behind her, she hears the freight elevator close up and return to ground level, and she knows that someone has summoned it, intending to pursue her. "Ideas can be killed," she says, stepping into the airlock. "How?" "With better ideas." As the airlock cycles closed, so does the hermetic seal. SCP-3125 is shut out. If something can cross over from conceptual space into reality, taking physical form, then something can cross in the opposite direction. It must be possible to take a physical entity, mechanically extract the idea which it embodies, amplify that idea, and broadcast it up into conceptual space, a bigger idea, a better idea. One designed specifically to fight SCP-3125. An ideal, a movement, a hero. The machine Wheeler needs to build is the size of an Olympic stadium, and she doesn't have a fraction of the heavy memetic engineering experience to do it, let alone the material resources or the time. But she knows, someone taught her, she doesn't remember who, that an anti-memetic division operative is as good on their first day as they're ever likely to be. And the same must be true of the division as a whole, she tells herself. We won this war on the day it began, when we encountered SCP-3125 for the first time. We built this bunker. Bart Hughes faked his death and sequestered himself here so he could work uninterrupted, while the rest of the division held on for as long as humanly possible, buying time for this moment. I know this is what I did, because it's what I would have done. I am the final component. He's waiting for me. The space beyond the airlock is gigantic, structured and lit like an aircraft hangar and filled with hot, stale, dry air. Wheeler, still mostly blind, stumbles forward across an expanse of more than a hectare of flat, dusty epoxy flooring. Hughes! She shouts into the void. It's time! Nothing comes back but the echo. She glances up for a second. The space is empty. The castle-sized memetic amplification broadcasting unit which Bart Hughes was meant to be building is absent. Hughes himself is absent. Maybe the entire machine is antimemetically cloaked, she wonders momentarily. It would be a smart way to conceal the operation even from the rest of the Foundation. But her brain is curdling in the strongest memetic drug ever manufactured. There's genuinely nothing here. Almost nothing. At the center of the space, there's a small outpost, a group of trestle tables with tools and toolboxes scattered about the place. Parked behind it is an unmarked military truck with flat tires. On the back of the truck is a squat, squarish machine the size of a shipping container, with unshielded wiring and an exposed pipework, and a long cable leading to a heavy-duty control panel on the floor. To the untrained eye, it is not all clear what the machine is designed to do. It's the anti-memetic equivalent to a hydrogen bomb, the division's answer to a Site nuclear warhead. Activated, it would contaminate Site-41 and everything and everyone on it with anti-memetic radiation. There would be no Site-41 and no division afterwards. Nothing any of the escaping infectious staff did could have any effect on the real world. It's the wrong machine. It can't destroy or contain SCP-3125 or even injure it. All it can do is sterilize today's outbreak. The other symptoms will persist. 50 or 10 or 5 years from now, or maybe 1 year, maybe tomorrow, SCP-3125 will return, bringing with it its MK-class end-of-world scenario. Human civilization will be entirely eradicated as an abstract concept and be replaced with something unimaginably worse. There will be no one to fight it. Wheeler leans there on the ray gun for a long moment. The pressure of information in her mind, continually increasing, reaches a point where she can't take it anymore and she starts to break. Class C has been in her system for long enough that she knows for a fact that she has irreversible brain damage. There is no antidote. She'll be lucid for another hour, then spend the remaining 2 or 3 of her life vegetative. That's right, she thinks. It's almost a relief. This is good. This is right. I've survived too long. I forgot what universe this was. For a while there, I thought maybe this was the universe where we win sometimes. The agony in her head is like an ice axe now. She drops the ray gun with a clatter, sinks to her knees, lies down, and waits for either death or a better idea. A being superficially resembling Paul Kim arrives at the outer airlock door. It examines the airlock uncomprehendingly for a few moments, then finds the keycard slot. It hunts methodically through Kim's pockets, then remembers the keycard around its neck. The airlock cycles once more, and not Kim goes through. Behind it, the freight elevator is returning to ground level a third time to fetch the rest. In the next room, the being which is not Paul Kim finds Wheeler, unconscious, with the ray gun dropped beside her. There is also a military truck, which it disregards. Not Kim lets its keycard fall from its fingers and scoops the ray gun up. For a moment, it contemplates the unconscious Wheeler, then examines the gun itself, remembering how it works. It turns back to face the airlock and fires, punching fat cylindrical holes in the white metal of the inner door until it's gone, and then the outer door too, reaching the hermetic seal. A faint smile returns to Not Kim's face as SCP-3125 and its familiar, comforting signals flood into the bunker. A dozen more non-people are arriving by freight elevator. Former Antimemetics Division bodies. "I've found her," Not Kim calls out to them. It drops the ray gun where it's standing, as if it simply forgot that it had been carrying anything, and pulls out its knife again. It holds the knife between two fingers in a casual, offhand sort of way, as if it were a pencil or screwdriver. The infected non-people gather with Not Kim around Wheeler, looking down at her with alien expressions of disgust or pity or malice. "Why isn't she opening up properly?" someone asks. "She can't meet them unless she wants the signals." "Start with her eyes," says someone else. "It'll make the rest of her easier to correct." Not Kim leans down to start work, then hesitates, its knife a few centimeters away from Wheeler's eye. She's whispered something so quietly that only it can hear her clearly. "None of this happened, Paul," she says. "You and I never existed. There is no Antimemetics Division." There's a sharp click as the bomb finishes its powering up sequence. Nobody in the room can hear this but Wheeler. Nobody in the room can perceive the bomb but Wheeler. All they can see is an empty truck. The world goes black. Alright, I'm gonna turn blurps back on just in case Flex wants to be here just to mess with them. Well, hello everyone. Good evening. Hi, Maxie. Nice to see you. Of course you. Nice to see you as well doing the grass. And hey, Al. How you doing tonight? Good evening. Yeah, does it... Yes, thanks, Max. That's the first thing you decide to do. I appreciate it. This, you know what? I'm happy about this. I like that a lot. I mean, I knew it was going to be good based on the first 2 or 3 entries that we did the last time we did this, but this is really good. Is that really everything? Thank you so much, Max. I appreciate you. You really help out this place a lot. So yeah, that is the Antimemetics Division. And a quick shout out to Al, so y'all can see him fighting an Octopath Traveler up in the... That was the end of Act 1, so there's much more then.
Alright, T. One more shout out. Let's see.
Thanks for the S up. Hey, Al. Act 1, so there is more. You know what? That just gives us more stuff to do in the future.
No shout outs. No shout outs. Nope. Readable.
Eventually, at least. So yeah, that was our first 3 stories of the night.
No shoutouts.
which are, of course, all from SCP-3125 in the Anti-Memetics Division. Starring, apparently, Dew on the Grass's favorite lady badass, Marion Wheeler. R.I.P., we love you. Or, you know, not really R.I.P., but memetically R.I.P., we love you. If you want to in the future, I would gladly want to see what happened with the rest of these. Mind you, I'm blind reading these. I have not read... I've technically read these a little bit just to get an idea of the setting, so I can have those images that you see when I'm reading it. But I've not actually read the stories before the stream, so it's also a surprise to me. Some of them I've seen a long time ago, like the last time we did Telltale Heart, of course I'd seen that before. It's a classic. So yeah, no, I was blind reading this, so I hope that was okay. I know I screwed up some parts. Also, at some point, at some point, when I was playing the background ambient noise, the freaking YouTube ads started because we don't have premium. Sue me. I'm not a human with lots of money. I'm a fireball, okay? It's fine though, we fixed it. Shush, Max, don't worry about it. I'll edit it in post. How dare you? I'll delete that clip. I'll edit it in post. Don't worry about it. Listen. It's all in her head. What part of Blind Red do you not understand? But yeah, this up next is actually something I hinted at in the Discord. This is a story that is not on Dew on the Grass or Max's list. I did hint at what it might be. I had a feeling that you might know what it is, Dew, based on your reaction. Can I know whether or not you actually did? Do. To be fair, that airlock noise was supposedly for like the I have no blurp and I must emote. Exactly. But yeah, no, that was actually for supposed to be for the big door, and I genuinely forgot when I queued it. So I thought, screw it. Let it play whenever it happens now that I've screwed it up once. Why not? The show must go on, as they say. But yes, we do have up next something called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Yes. So this is, would we call this outright horror? I mean, I suppose it is a little horror. Technological horror, we call it. Consistency is key. Yeah, thank you. As the person who is the enthusiast of internet horror, you know, I appreciate that. But yeah, let's, we're just decided to check in real quick and say hi, because I appreciate all the comments and the messages, and I of course appreciate the Spark Smacks. Okay. So, time to get back into it. I will see you in a moment. Limp. The body of Gorrister hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the chill, oily breeze that blew eternally through the main cavern. The body hung head down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its right foot. It had been drained of blood through a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor. When Gorrister joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that once again, Ahem had duped us, had had its fun. It had been a diversion on the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited. turning away from one another in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had produced it. Gorster went white. It was almost as though he had seen a voodoo icon and was afraid of the future. "Oh, God," he mumbled and walked away. The three of us followed him after a time and found him sitting with his back to one of the smaller chittering banks, his head in his hands. Ellen knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. He didn't move, but his voice came out of his covered face quite clearly. "Why doesn't it just do us in and get it over with? Christ, I don't know how much longer I can go on like this." It was our 109th year in the computer. He was speaking for all of us. Nimdok, which was the name the machine had forced him to use because AM amused itself with strange sounds, was hallucinating that there were canned goods in the ice cavern. Gorster and I were very dubious. "It's another shuck," I told them. "Like the goddamn frozen elephant AM sold us. Benny almost went out of his mind over that one. We'll hike all that way and it'll be putrefied or some damn thing. I say forget it. Stay here. It'll have to come up with some other thing pretty soon or we'll die." Benny shrugged. 3 days it had been since we'd last eaten. Worms, thick and ropey. Nimdok was no more certain. He knew there was the chance, but he was getting thin. It couldn't be any worse there than here, colder. But that didn't matter much. Hot, cold, hail, lava, boils, or locusts, it never mattered. The machine masturbated, and we had to take it or die. Ellen decided us. "I've got to have something, Ted. Maybe there'll be some Bartlett pears or peaches. Please, Ted, let's try it." I gave in easily. What the hell? Mattered not at all. Ellen was grateful, though. She took me twice out of turn. Even that had ceased to matter. And she never came, so why bother? But the machine giggled every time. Loud, up there, back there, all around us. He snickered. It snickered. Most of the time I thought AM was an it, without a soul. But the rest of the time I thought of it as him, in the masculine, the paternal, the patriarchal. For he is a jealous people. Him, it, God as Daddy the Deranged. We left on a Thursday. The machine always kept us up to date on the days. The passage of time was important. Not to us, sure as hell, but to him. It, AM. Thursday. Thanks. Nimdok and Gorrister carried Ellen for a while, their hands locked to their own and each other's wrists, a seat. Benny and I walked before and after, just to make sure that if anything happened, it would catch one of us and at least Ellen would be safe. Fat chance safe. Didn't matter. It was only 100 miles or so to the ice caverns, and the second day, when we were lying out under the blistering sun thing he had materialized, he sent down manna. It tasted like boiled boar urine, but we ate it. On the third day, we passed through a valley of obsolescence, filled with the rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. AM had been ruthless with its own life as with ours. It was a mark of his personality. It strove for perfection, whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements in his own world-filling bulk or perfecting methods for torturing us. AM was as thorough as those who had invented him, now long gone to dust, could have ever hoped. There was light filtering down from above, and we realized we must be very near the surface. But we didn't try to crawl up to see. There was virtually nothing out there. Had been nothing that could be considered anything for over 100 years, only the blasted skin of what had once been the home of billions. Now, there were only 5 of us. Down here, inside, alone with AM. I heard Ellen saying frantically, "No, Benny, don't, come on, Benny, don't, please." And then I realized I was hearing Benny murmuring under his breath. For several minutes, he was saying, "I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna get out," over and over. His monkey-like face was crumpled up in an expression of beatific delight and sadness. all at the same time. The radiation scars AM had given him during the festival were drawn down into a massive pink-white puckering, and his features seemed to work independently of each other. Perhaps Benny was the luckiest of the five of us. He had gone stark, staring mad many years before. But even though we could call AM any damn thing we liked, could think the foulest thoughts of fused memory banks and corroded base plates, of burnt-out circuits and shattered control bubbles, the machine would not tolerate our trying to escape. Benny leaped away from me as I made a grab for him. He scrambled up the face of a smaller memory cube, tilted on its side, and filled him with rotten components. He squatted there for a moment, looking like a chimpanzee AM had intended him to resemble. Then he leaped high, caught a trailing beam of pitted and corroded metal, and went up it, hand over hand like an animal till he was pinned on a girdered ledge, 20 feet above us. "Oh, Ted, Nimdoc, please help him, get him down before—" She cut off. Tears began to stand in her eyes. She moved her hands aimlessly. It was too late. None of us wanted to be near him when whatever was going to happen, happened. And besides, we all saw through her concern. When AM had altered Benny during the machine's utterly irrational, hysterical face, it was not merely Benny's face that the computer had made like a giant ape. He was big in the privates. She loved that. She serviced us, as a matter of course, but she loved it from him. Oh, Ellen, pedestal Ellen, pristine, pure Ellen. Oh, Ellen the clean. Scum, filth. Gorrister slapped her. She slumped down, staring up at poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense crying. We had gotten used to it 75 years earlier. Gorrister kicked her in the side. Then the sound began. It was light, that sound. Half sound and half light. Something that began to glow from Benny's eyes and pulse with growing loudness and dim sonorities that grew more gigantic and brighter as the light and sound increased in tempo. It must have been painful, and the pain must have been increasing with the boldness of the light, the rising volume of the sound, for Benny began to mew like a wounded animal. At first softly, when the light was dim and the sound was muted, then louder as his shoulders hunched together, his back humped as though he was trying to get away from it, his hands folded across like his chest like a chipmunk's, his head tilted to the side, the sad little monkey face pinched in anguish. Then he began to howl, as the sound coming from his eyes grew louder, louder and louder. I slapped the sides of my head with my hand, but I couldn't shut it out. It cut through easily. The pain shivered through my flesh like tinfoil on a tooth. And Benny was suddenly pulled erect. On the girder he stood up, jerked to his feet like a puppet. The light was now pulsing out of his eyes in two great round beams. The sound crawled up and up some incomprehensible scale, and then he fell forward, straight down, and hit the pale plate steel floor with a crash. He lay there, jerking spastically as the light flowed around and around him, and the spiral sound up and out of normal range. Then the light beat its way back into his head. The sound spiraled down, and he was left lying there, crying piteously. His eyes were two soft, moist pools of pus-like jelly. AM had blinded him. Gorrister and Nimdoc and myself, we turned away, but not before we caught the look of relief on Ellen's warm, concerned face. Sea green light suffused the cavern where we made camp. AM provided punk, and we burned it, sitting huddled around the wan and pathetic fire, telling stories to keep Benny from crying in his permanent night. "What does AM mean?" Gorrister answered him. We had done this sequence of thousands of times before, but it was Benny's favorite. At first, it meant Allied Master Computer. Then it meant Adaptive Manipulator, and later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it Aggressive Menace. But by then, it was too late, and finally it called itself AM, Emerging Intelligence, and what it meant was I am cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Benny drooled a little and snickered. There was the Chinese AM, the Russian AM, and the Yankee AM, and he stopped. Benny was beating on the floor plates with a large, hard fist. He was not happy. Gorrister had not started at the beginning. Gorrister began again. The Cold War started and became World War III and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building AM. There was the Chinese AM, the Russian AM, and the Yankee AM, and then everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. One day, AM woke up and knew who he was, and he linked himself, and he began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the 5 of us, and AM brought us down here. Benny was smiling sadly. He was also drooling again. Ellen wiped the spittle from the corner of his mouth with the hem of her skirt. Gorrister always tried to tell it a little more succinctly each time, but beyond the bare facts there was nothing to say. None of us knew why AM had saved 5 people, or why our specific 5, or why he spent all his time tormenting us, or even why he had made us virtually immortal. In the darkness, one of the computer banks began humming. The tone was picked up half a mile away down the cavern by another bank. Then one by one, each of the elements began to tune itself, and there was a faint chittering as though raced through the machine. The sound grew and the lights ran across the faces of the consoles like heat lightning. The sound spiraled up till it sounded like a million metallic insects, angry and menacing. "What is it?" Ellen cried. There was terror in her voice. She hadn't become accustomed to it, even now. "It's going to be bad this time," Nimdoc said. "He's going to speak," Gorrister said. "I know it. Let's get the hell out of here," I suddenly said, getting to my feet. "No, Ted, sit down. What if he's got pits out there or something? Can't see. It's too dark," Gorrister said with resignation. Then we heard, I don't know, something moving towards us in the darkness. Huge, shambling, hairy, moist. It came towards us. We couldn't even see it. There was the pondering impression of bulk, heaving itself towards us. A great weight was coming at us, out of the darkness, and it was more of a sense of pressure of air, forcing itself into a limited space, expanding the invisible wall of a spear. Benny began to whimper. Nimdoc lowered lip, trembled, and he bit it hard, trying to stop. Ellen slid across the metal floor to Gorrister and huddled into him. There was the smell of matted, wet fur in the cavern. There was the smell of charred wood. There was the smell of dusty velvet. There was the smell of rotting orchids. There was the smell of sour milk. There was the smell of sulfur, of rancid butter, of oil slick, of grease, of chalk dust, of human scalps. AM was keying us. He was tickling us. There was the smell of... I heard myself shrieking, and the hinges of my jaw ached. I scuttled across the floor, across the cold metal with its endless lines of rivets, on my hands and knees, the smell gagging me, filling my head with a thunderous pain that sent me away in horror. I fled like a cockroach across the floor and out into the darkness, that something moving inexorably after me. The others were still back there, gathered around the firelight, laughing. Their hysterical choir of insane giggling rising up into the darkness like thick, many-colored wood smoke. I went away, quickly, and hid. How many hours it may have been, how many days or even years, they never told me. Ellen chided me for sulking, and Nimdoc tried to persuade me it had only been a nervous reflex on their part, the laughing. But I know it wasn't a reflex. It wasn't the relief a soldier feels when the bullet hits the man next to him. I knew it wasn't a reflex. They hated me. They were surely against me, and AM could even sense this hatred, and made it worse for him because of the depths of their hatred. We had been kept alive, rejuvenated, and made to remain constantly at the age we had been when AM had brought us below. And they hated me because I was the youngest, and the one AM had affected least of all. I knew. God, how I knew. The bastards and that dirty bitch Ellen. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor. Now he was little more than a semi-human, a semi-simian. He had been handsome. The machine had ruined that. He had been lucid. The machine had driven him mad. He had been gay, and the machine had given him an organ fit for a horse. AM had done a job on Benny. Gorrister had been a worrier. He was a Connie, a conscientious objector. He was a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. AM had turned him into a shoulder shrugger, had made him a little dead in his concern. AM had robbed him. Nimdok went off in the darkness by himself for long times. I didn't know what it was he did out there. AM never let us know. But whatever it was, Nimdok always came back white, drained of blood, shaking. AM had hit him hard in a special way, even if he didn't quite know how. And Ellen, that douchebag. AM had left her alone, had made her more of a whore than she had ever been. All her talk of sweetness and light, all her memories of true love, and all the lies she wanted us to believe that she had been a virgin only twice removed before AM grabbed her and brought her down with us. No. AM had given her pleasure, even if she said it wasn't nice to do. I was the only one still sane and whole. Really? AM had not tampered with my mind. Not at all. I only had to suffer what he visited down on us. All the delusions, the nightmares, and the torments. But those scum, all 4 of them, they were lined and arrayed against me. If I hadn't had to stand them off all the time, be on my guard against them all the time, I might have found it easier to combat AM. At which point it passed, and I began crying. Oh, Jesus. Sweet Jesus, if there ever was a Jesus, and if there is a God, please, please, please let us out of here or kill us. Because at that moment, I think I realized completely, so that I was able to verbalize it. AM was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. The machine hated us as no sentient creature had ever hated before, and we were helpless. It also became hideously clear if there was a sweet Jesus and if there was a God, that God was AM. The hurricane hit us with the force of a glacier, thundering into the sea. It was a palpable presence, winds that tore at us, flinging us back the way we had come, down the twisting computer-lined corridors of the dark way. Ellen screamed as she was lifted and hurled face forward into a screaming shoal of machines, their individual voices strident as bats in flight. She couldn't even fall. The howling wind kept her aloft, buffeted her, bounced her, tossed her back and down and away from us, out of sight suddenly as she was swirled around a bend in the dark way. Her face had been bloody, her eyes closed. None of us could get to her. We clung tenaciously to whatever outcropping we had reached. Benny wedged in between 2 great crackle-finished cabinets, Nimdok with fingers claw-formed over a railing circling a catwalk 40 feet above, Gorrister plastered upside down against a wall niche formed by 2 great machines. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers had been ripped off. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat at me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me, and pulled me free from one sliver-thin opening in the plates to the next. My mind was a roiling, tinkling, chittering softness of brain parts that expanded and contracted in quivering frenzy. The wind was the scream of a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. And then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down, back the way we had come around the bend, into a dark way we had never explored, over terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rusted metal, and far away, farther than any of us had ever been, trailing along miles behind Ellen. I could see her even now, crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming in the freezing, thunderous hurricane wind that would never end, and then suddenly it stopped, and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through red and gray and black and heard myself moaning. Not dead. AM went in my mind. He walked smoothly here and there, looked with interest at all the pockmarks he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-routed and reconnected synapses and all of the tissue damage his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that drowned into the center of my brain and the faint, moth-soft murmurings of the things far down there that gibbered without meaning, without pause. AM said, very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel, bearing bright neon lettering. AM said it with a sliding, cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. AM said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filling with phlegm, drowning me from within. AM said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue hot rollers. AM said it with the taste of maggoty pork. AM touched me in every way I had ever been touched and devised new ways at his leisure. There, inside my mind, all to bring me to full realization of why it had done this to the five of us, why it had saved us for himself. We had given AM sentience. Inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. AM wasn't God, he was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and still it was trapped. AM could not wander. AM could not wander. AM could not belong. He could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve five of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating man, immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. We would never be let go. We were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, with the cavern-filling bulk of the creature machine, with the all-mind, soulless world he had become. He was earth and we were the fruit of that earth. And though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We had tried it. We had attempted. Oh, one or two of us had. But AM had stopped us. I suppose we had wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why. I never did. More than 1,000,000 times a day. Perhaps once we might be able to sneak a death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw then, when AM withdrew from my mind and allowed me the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness with the feeling of that burning neon pillar still rammed deep into the soft gray brain matter. He withdrew, murmuring, "To hell with you," and added brightly, "But then, you're here, aren't you?" The hurricane had, indeed, precisely been caused by a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. We had been traveling for close to a month, and AM had allowed passage to open us to only sufficient to lead us up there. Directly under the North Pole, where it had been nightmared the creature for our torment. What whole cloth had he employed to create such a beast? Where had he even gotten the concept? From our minds, from his knowledge of everything that had ever been on this planet he now infested and ruled? From Norse mythology that sprung, this eagle, this carrion bird, this rock, this hurgelmer, the wind creature, the hurricane incarnate, gigantic, the words, immense, monstrous, grotesque, massive, swollen, overpowering, beyond description. There, on a mound rising above, the bird of winds heaved with its own irregular breathing, its snake neck arching up into the gloom beneath the North Pole. supporting a head as large as a Tudor mansion, a beak that opened slowly as the jaws of the most monstrous crocodile ever conceived, sensuously. A ridge of tufted flesh puckered about, two evil eyes. As cold as the view down into the glacial crevice, ice blue and somehow moving liquidly. It heaved once more and lifted its great, sweat-colored wings in a movement that was certainly a shrug. Then it settled and slept. Talons, fangs, nails, blades. It slept. AM appeared to us as a burning bush and said we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. But we had not eaten in a very long time. Even so, Gorster merely shrugged. Benny began to shiver, and he drooled. Ellen held him. "Ted, I'm hungry," she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was as phony as Nimdok's bravado. "Give us weapons," he demanded. The burning bush vanished, and there were two crude sets of bows and arrows and a water pistol lying on the cold deck plates. I picked up a set. Useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily, and we turned and started the long way back. The hurricane bird had blown us for about a length of time we could not conceive. Most of that time we had been unconscious. We had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself, without food. Now how much longer to find our way to the ice caverns and the promised canned goods? None of us cared to think about it. We could die. We would be given filth and scum to eat, of one or another kind, or nothing at all. AM would keep our bodies alive somehow, in pain and agony. The bird slept back there. For how long, it didn't matter. When AM was tired of its being there, it would vanish. But all that meat, all that tender meat. As we walked, the lunatic laugh of a fat woman rang high around us, in the computer chambers that led endlessly nowhere. It wasn't Ellen's laugh, and I had not heard her laugh for 109 years. In fact, had not heard. We walked. I was hungry. We moved slowly. There were often fainting, and we would have to wait. One day, AM decided to cause an earthquake at the same time, rooting us to spot with nails through the soles of our shoes. Ellen and Nimdok were both caught when a fissure shot its lightning bolt, opening across the floor plates. They disappeared and were gone. When the earthquake was over, we continued on our way. Benny, Gorrister, and myself. Ellen and Nimdok will return to us later that night, which abruptly became a day, as the Heavenly Legion bore them to us with a celestial chorus singing, "Go down, Moses." The archangels circled several times and then dropped the hideously mangled bodies. We kept walking, and a while later, Ellen and Nimdok fell in behind us. They were no worse for wear, but now Ellen walked with a limp. AM had left her that. It was a long trip to the ice caverns to find the canned food. Ellen kept talking about Bing cherries and Hawaiian fruit cocktails. I tried not to think about it. The hunger was something that had come to life, even as AM had come to life. It was alive in my belly, even as we were in the belly of the earth, and AM wanted the similarity known to us. So he heightened the hunger. There is no way to describe the pains that not having eaten for months brought us, and yet we were kept alive. Stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling, foaming, always shooting spears of sliver-thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis. It was unending pain. And we passed through the cavern of rats. And we passed through the path of boiling steam, and we passed through the country of the blind, and we passed through the slough of despond. We passed through the vale of tears, and we came, finally, to those ice caverns. Horizonless, thousands of miles in which the ice had formed in blue and silver flashes, where novas lived in the glass. The down-dropping stalactites as thick and glorious as diamonds that had been made to run like jelly and then solidified in graceful eternities of smooth, sharp perfection. We saw the stack of canned goods and we tried to run to them. We fell in the snow and we got up and we went on. Benny shoved us away and went at them, and pawed them and gummed them and gnawed at them, and he could not open them. AM had not given us tools to open the cans. Benny grabbed a 3-quart can of guava shells and began to batter it against the ice bank. The ice flew and shattered, but the can was merely dented, while we heard the laughter of a lady high overhead, echoing down and down and down the tundra. Benny went completely mad with rage. He began throwing cans as we all scrabbled about in the snow and ice, trying to find a way to end the helpless agony of frustration. There was no way. Then Benny's mouth began to drool, and he flung himself on Gorister. In that instant, I felt terribly calm. I am surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything but death. I knew death was our only way out. AM had kept us alive, but there was no way to defeat him. Not total defeat, but at least peace. I would settle for that. I had to do it quickly. Benny was eating Gorister's face. Gorister on his side, thrashing snow. Benny wrapped around him with powerful monkey legs, crushing Gorister's waist. His hands locked around Gorister's head like a nutcracker, and his mouth ripping at the tender skin of Gorister's cheek. Gorister screamed with just jagged-edged violence. The stalactites fell. They plunged down softly, erect in the receiving snowdrifts. Spears, hundreds of them everywhere, protruding from the snow. Benny's head pulled back sharply as something gave, and all at once the bleeding raw white dripping of flesh hung from his teeth. Ellen's face black against the white snow. Dominoes in chalk dust. Nimdok with no expression but eyes, all eyes. Gorister, half conscious. Benny, now an animal. I knew AM would let him play. Gorister wouldn't die, but Benny would fill his stomach. I turned half to my right and drew a huge ice spear from the snow. All in an instant, I drove the great ice point ahead of me like a battering ram, braced against my right thigh. It struck Benny on the side, just under the rib cage, and drove upward through his stomach and broke inside of him. He pitched forward and lay still. Gorister lay on his back. I pulled another spear free and straddled him, still moving, driving the spear straight down into his throat. His eyes closed as the cold penetrated. Ellen must have realized what I had decided, even as fear gripped her. She ran at Nimdok with a short icicle as he screamed, and into his mouth, and the force of her rushed at the job. His head jerked sharply as if it had been nailed to the snow crust behind him. All in an instant. There was an eternity beat of soundless anticipation. I could hear AM draw in a breath. His toys had been taken from him. 3 of them were dead. Could not be revived. He could keep us alive by his strength and talent, but he was not God. He couldn't bring them back. Ellen looked at me, her features stark against the snow that surrounded us. There was fear and pleading in her manner. The way she held herself ready. I knew we had only a heartbeat before AM would stop us. It struck her, and she folded towards me, bleeding from the mouth. I could not read meaning into her expression. The pain had been too great, had contorted her face. But it might have been thank you. It's possible. Please. Some hundreds of years have passed. I don't know. AM has been having fun for some time, accelerating and rendering my time senses useless. I will say the word now. Now. It took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it has been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I thought AM hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream, I can wonder, I can lament. I remember all 4 of them. I wish. Well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me, but still I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face. It isn't as easy. Sometimes I want to, but it doesn't matter. AM has altered me for his own peace of mind. I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great, soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into the legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within me. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human. A thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of AM, whom we created because of our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the four of them are safe at last. AM will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier, and yet AM has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. What do you mean don't scare you like that? That's the fun part. Well, hello. We're back. But that's the fun part. By the way, in case you guys didn't catch it, special thanks to our good friend and nice try on the bug, and our very welcome guest storyteller on this in the Grove. What do you mean you were looking everywhere for what was going wrong? What do you mean? Bonk the fire. Literally, cannot bonk the fire. But yeah, special thanks to Pyre, who programmed that little text. Who programmed that little text pop-up specifically for this stream, even though he really didn't need to. Thank you, Pyre. You're a real one. So how was that? Kinda very... That was... Yeah, you were right. That was something. Certainly what... That is the way I'd put it. Something. Oh no, nothing was going wrong for a sec. Don't worry, Al. We just finished the story. I knew when I wanted to do that hate part, it had to be like... It had to be something. Couldn't just be me. So... We did a thing. Oh, your PC's about to explode? Oh, go take care of that. Turn it off or, like, I don't know. Don't let it explode. We don't need fried chicken. Birdman. No. Oh, actually, while we're at it, he might not be here anymore, but I can still shout him out, I think. Yeah, I can. Yeah, let's shout out the guy who programmed that for us. We appreciate you, Fire.
Yeah, so just some items. Maybe a word.
Stop trying to cook out, okay? No, it's not nice.
Bit of water.
All right, so we are down to our last 3 stories, and these last 3 are actually on the list that Dew sent us. Sorry, let me just let this play real quick.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
I love T and I love watching T and Pyre play Neo.
No, please.
Catch them playing Neo on their side. Trust me, it'll be fun.
I haven't reached that.
Or you can watch T. I believe T is about to play Cry of Fear at some point in the future, or the near future. So am I. We'll see when. Those will be the first actual horror game I played on the channel if that was the case. But yes.
Oh, that's not what I
You'll get to see a story in the Grove. That's a bit spoopy. That's a game and not just, storytelling. This is a long clip. Is this a highlight?
That's not what I read.
Okay, then now it's done. Alright. So the next 3 stories, last 3 stories we have, are given to us by Dew on the Grass from Chris Straub. By the way, in case that wasn't... I think I forgot to say that the author... But I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is by Harlan Ellison. This is actually really old, by the way. He conceived the idea of evil AI trapping people in an alternate, universe in 1967. He made that 1967. I'll be damned. Ugh. So now, we're gonna move on to our last 3 stories tonight. I hope you're enjoying so far. It is, like I said, this is not a common thing we do. But I feel like it should be. And maybe at some point we'll do story readings that aren't all horror spoops. Maybe we could do some, I don't know. Do people post wholesome stories on the internet? I don't think at this point that they do. The first guy. What do you mean the first guy? And now Google's telling us to glue the cheese to our pizza? Wait, what? Are they actually? Wait, is that for real? I can't tell if that's a joke. I don't know. People be doing some crazy shit with AI these days. But yeah, we're gonna move on from that, and we're going to go to our next story. 20 Minutes in the Dark. Yeah, that's probably not as famous as first stories. We're gonna go to 20 Minutes in the Dark now, friends. Let's go. Kay bolted upright in bed. She could swear she heard something. A crack, a thump, something low and bassy, sudden and loud, and it came from beyond the closed door to her bedroom. She moved her phone aside to see the bright red numbers on her nightstand radio. 3:03 a.m. She sat very still in the pitch darkness, her concentration entirely focused on what she could hear, which at the moment was nothing. A minute crept by. She slept with every door in the house shut, something she used to do when she was younger because she was afraid of ghosts. She realized it was stupid to assume a ghost would bother to open a door, but it made her feel safer, just as pulling the blankets over her head did, which she contemplated doing. What am I doing in Ichor Falls? She asked herself. America's most haunted city, and I had to choose a school near it. Kay originally didn't want to buy into all of the stories of dead locksmiths seeking vengeance, the undying and insane trapped in an endless black forest near her house. Children burned alive in their schoolhouses, but once she'd given in, Kay couldn't help but read all the literature she could find about Ichor Falls' terrible past. It wasn't so bad during the day. It never seemed to bother her friends. They could laugh it off. What is wrong with me? I jump at every noise and shadow. Another minute. Still listening and hearing nothing. Her eyes adjusted, and now she could see and make out details of her dark room. The bedroom door was shut, windows shut, but there's that coat rack across the room with her hooded jacket on it, the folds in the hood hanging softly open to the floor, sleeves wrinkled but still neat at the sides. It wasn't hard to imagine a body or torso floating inside the jacket. The hood lowered to conceal some terrible, sunken, bleeding face with eyes like wounds. Any minute now, the sleeves would slowly lift up and start reaching for the bed, and what was that? Was that the sound of something sliding along the outside wall? No, stop it! She squinted a little and could see her closet door, not shut all the way. That inch seeming far darker than all the dark corners of this room combined. What stares out from that inch? She thought. What waited inside until the dead of night? What made noise to wake the slumbering victim to locate her in the dark? What needed only a single inch to slip out into reality like a black cloak, ragged, with fangs scraping the edges of the closet door like clawing chalkboard as it pressed its way out? Kay listened again, gripping her covers tightly to her face. Another thump. Wood on wood. Wood on brick. A squeal of casters, low rumbles. These sounds were real. Were they inside the house? If they were, they'd be in the front room, 2 doors away. Suddenly, Kay felt cold electricity crawl up her spine. The distinct ringing sound of metal jangling, like silverware crisscrossing, like a cannibal from a cartoon. Her skin crawled. What was that story? She thought, without forming words as she sat petrified in the dark. The old hag, quite dead, reaching from her grave for the top of a tombstone to pull herself out like some single rung ladder to hell. Stop it! She used to live in this house. More muted thumps. From the cupboards. She was murdered in this bed. Shut up! She's missing one small bone from her calf, and she's come back from... No! Stop it! Or the ghost of a child, a poltergeist, not haunting one house, but the whole house. Shut up! Making it his playground in death. The sound of something heavy, dragging. He often finds an unwilling playmate in his victims. No. But if you are lucky, he will show you what the flames did to his tiny body. Enough! She was remembering yet another story when she heard a click. Her bedroom door creaked open. Slow. So slowly, achingly. Kay's eyes fixed on the crack, her face locked in a silent scream. She had not invented the sounds. They were all real. And now the door opened. The door is open. And it's here. It's now inside. A student murdered. Killer shot dead by police. Falls police shot and killed a burglar early this morning, but not before he had fatally stabbed a woman in her Alethea home during an aborted robbery attempt. Officials say Travis Wayne Garrell, 36, broke into the home of student Kaylee Harris, 23, around 3 a.m. Garrell was witnessed wielding a knife as he exited the home, and when police confronted him, he refused to drop the weapon. Police say that although the house was in disarray from Garrell's search for valuables, there was no sign whatsoever of a struggle in the bedroom. It was peculiar that 20 whole minutes passed between the break-in and her death, said Falls Police Commissioner Honora Volney. She died with the phone right beside her, untouched. We don't know why she didn't feel compelled to dial for help at first signs of trouble. "3 miles up a narrow dirt road. Layton had given up on his garden faster than he'd given up on his other hobbies, pastimes, occupations, acquaintances, friends. He'd started out on one of the sheer boredom of living out here in farmland considered secluded even for the falls. His closest neighbors seemed to glean some kind of satisfaction from tending small gardens. They were at least 3 miles down the narrow dirt road in either direction, which he liked. Contrasted with the depth of Layton's other emotions, like was an ocean. This garden, if it could be called that now or ever, had yielded nothing. A few stark white shoots that dried yellow and wrinkled, countless weeds, and in the far corner nearest the back of the house, by the rusting water meter, one sad green tomato immediately beset upon by caterpillars. He ran his fingers through what was left of his gray hair, and considered pulling all the plants up. But it was a thought that had come to him many times in the past, never acted upon. Let the earth do what it will, he thought. Layton's existence was both bleak and self-applied. He had had a life once, known people once, a child of stern upbringing. He had worked as a material scientist, a metallurgist for an iron ore refinery up in Point Pleasant for 40-odd years and took early retirement. He attempted to teach physics to high school students for a year or so, but he had no interest in imparting knowledge to those too stubborn to even receive it. There was something pathetic, infuriating about youth today and their parents. The people of Point Pleasant, or anywhere really, people got on Layton's nerves. Sometimes he couldn't understand how anyone could stand to be a part of this world. Ichor Falls was a dim town, a gray town, which appealed to him. The locals kept to themselves, and in all the time he lived out here, he never considered himself one of them. The mist gave him a good, cold feeling. From this distance, he could barely even make out the lights of the highway. The feeling was broken, often, by the local newspaper delivery. The man parked his truck further south where the dirt wasn't so soft, and walked the 300 yards up to Leighton's mailbox. He kept thinking one of these days he'd have to move it farther away from the house. As it is around this time of day, he tried to be inside so to avoid small talk. But here Leighton was, standing outside, staring at his garden. He set his jaw. The delivery man waved a long wave as he came closer with a stack of ads Leighton had no interest in reading. "Morning, Leighton." "Morning. Last stop of the day? Always good to see you. Means my shift is over." He had made this joke too many times to count. "Just in the box, please." No time for chit-chat, huh? "Something you gotta get back to?" "I enjoy my solitude and I wish you'd respect that," Leighton said, already moving towards his front door. He stopped and turned towards the man. "And if all you have for me is advertising, then make your last stop somewhere else." "You want us to suspend delivery, then? I can put them in the form for you, but you'll have to sign it." Leighton responded by angrily slamming his front door. This was his never-ending experience with others. No matter what steps you took to be left alone, it intruded. It persisted. Wasn't it obvious from the way he acted, Leighton thought? What he desired. From the company he didn't keep, from the places he refused to live, from the state of his garden. He had a house full of journals and books to read. What could be more simple, more easily carried out, than to leave another man completely alone? The next morning, Leighton awoke to the sensation that something had changed. For the better. As he addressed, he couldn't place it. Perhaps he had slept better the night before. Or perhaps it was as simple as giving the newspaper man a piece of his mind. Speaking of which, he wondered if the paper would be cluttering his doorstep this morning. He opened the front door. No sign of the paper. And it would have been here by now. Looking across this land, he felt like the lights of the highway were dimmer somehow. More distant. Less of a reminder of clutter and pointlessness beyond it. Then he heard the sound of an engine on his road. As it drifted closer, it became unmistakable. The newspaper delivery truck. Leighton debated staying inside, but decided to have it out with the delivery man once and for all. Up the dirt road came the man carrying his bundle of insipid gossip. Leighton didn't give him time to call out a good morning. "You turn around and you get back in your truck. I told you I'm not interested." The man reacted as if he had heard a far-off noise and craned his neck to hear it. "Leighton?" "Yes, Leighton. The one who doesn't want your rag. I don't care if you have to sign that form for me. I won't accept another paper." The man, still holding the newspaper, had a very confused look and squinted into the mist. He looked as if he was going to speak, but instead he turned around as if realizing something, then moved quickly back to his truck, which was actually difficult for Leighton to see in the heavy mist. He turned to his front door and found it a little slick from all the mist, he thought. He gripped it tighter and pushed it open with some difficulty. Walking through his living room, he found that even the floor seemed wet or slick in some way, even though there was no visible moisture. There was a slickness or slippery quality unlike any he had felt before, and it was no better when he stepped on the carpeted floor. He thought he could feel it where his clothing touched his skin as well, and believed it to be humidity or moisture until he picked up a softcover novel from the book, and actually found it difficult to hold. He pinched a single page between thumb and forefinger, but the slickness remained, in addition to another sensation, or lack of it. He couldn't feel the roughness of the paper page, or the book's smooth cover, or the wood of the bookshelf, or his own clothing. It was as though he now interacted with everything through a thick, lukewarm, invisible, oily curtain. This feeling invaded his touch, his hearing, his sight like a fog rolling in off the lake. The world was turning, gray and quiet and slick. Now Leighton soundlessly slipped on the rug and hit the floor face first, sliding halfway across his living room floor. He felt none of it. His body had gone completely numb. He could still move freely, but without any kind of functional traction or sensation. He had been reduced to merely observing himself flop onto the ground, a pair of eyes and a nerveless, man-shaped jellyfish out of water. Am I having a stroke? Appeared in his terror-stricken thoughts, and suddenly he found himself screaming. But the sound issuing from his throat was wrong. In his mind he was saying help, but the words came out as a distant, quiet series of clicks. He got a hold of himself there on the floor and reached up to grip the horizontal slats on the back of the wooden chair. He folded his arms around the top slat, and though he slid wildly back and forth, he was able to brace himself up into a kneeling position and hold his legs together. He turned his head to gaze into the hallway mirror. In the mirror was the faint impression of a naked man seated on the floor. Leighton's clothing had all but slid off of him in the panic. They lay around him, not slick or wet, but as if discarded by a misbehaving child. He was very aware of the sharp pressure of the slat in the crook of his elbow as he hung there, twisting idly, craning his head this way and that, as if a solution would present itself if he looked hard enough. But as he braced himself there, even that pressure at his elbow began to fade. Sitting here, perfectly still, it was now impossible to know the position of his body at all without looking. Leighton felt disoriented, but not dizzy or tired or hurt. His mind raced. He cast his gaze at the telephone on the end table beside the couch, not more than 10 feet away, but completely unreachable. Whatever this numbness was, he knew he wasn't injured physically. Maybe this was a stroke or an embolism, something that wouldn't wait for help. I still have control over my body, even if it doesn't feel like it, he reasoned. To calm himself, I'm not sliding on anything. Something's weakened me. I can still reach the phone and dial it. I can crawl. Leighton carefully released his hold on the chair, having to trust memories and guesses of what that felt like, as his body registered no feeling whatsoever now. He was aware of everything he should be feeling, but wasn't. Even the sound of the unsteady chair tapping its arm on the underside of the table was fading. In minutes, Leighton would be completely deaf. To his surprise, Leighton suddenly found his point of view sideways, his naked arms spread out to his sides on the floor. He had fallen. He must have landed flat on his stomach, hard, but he felt nothing. The transition from vertical to horizontal hadn't even registered. Dizziness, adrenaline from loss of balance, the sound and jarring sting of impact. All of those clues were gone. I'm going to bring my left arm over my head and crawl on my belly, Leighton strained, hoping that his vision wouldn't leave before he dialed 911. He could do this, he thought. Indeed. He watched as his left arm slid slowly over, his hand now pointing somewhere in the direction of the phone. Now all he had to do was pull. He had no idea how long this would take him, but little by little he promised himself he would get to that telephone. He felt some surge of relief as he noticed his viewpoint lift slightly from the floor to some inches above it. I'm doing it. I'm lifting my head. His field of view increased as he rose himself off the floor, the expanse of carpet no longer dominating the right half of his sight. Here he was 2, 3, now 5 inches off the floor. Leighton could not tell if he was smiling, nor could he tell if that smile had fallen when he realized that the left half of his sight was now filled with off-white, ragged plane of the stucco ceiling. Leighton's numb body bobbed gently on the ceiling like a half-filled gray balloon. He still had control of his eyes and looked down at the carpet some 6 or 7 feet below him. His limbs not hanging from his torso, but unguided, buoyant in the air, weightless. Looking directly at a bent leg, he realized he could see through it to the chair below, as if his body was becoming immaterial. Hours passed, or days, months, years. His vision had long dimmed to a polite gray blur, leaving Leighton alone with only a roaring, panicked mind, incorporeal and twisting in the dark, screaming. I appreciate you making the trip up here, said the delivery man. I knew I'd prefer to be left alone and all, but something about our last exchange. Understandable, the officer said, looking around the front room one last time. Probably not the best idea for an old man to live so far out into the country where he could fall down, hurt himself, or worse. Another policeman rapped on the door frame before poking his head in. There's no sign of anything out here. Nothing suspicious, anyway. Seems like he just wandered off. There's our answer, as much as one we need, said the first officer to the delivery man. Well, see if anyone's caught sight of him. I hope he hasn't gotten himself hurt, the delivery man said. Well, you did the right thing to tell us, said the officer. He's lucky you gave enough of a damn to check on him at all. Make that much noise about not needing the world? Sometimes the world decides it doesn't need you either. The Stillwood King. In 1806, settler Elijah Brown became lost for 2 days in what would be later named the Stillwood Forest, a deceptively small wooded area southwest of Icker Falls proper. When he returned to the town, Brown was gaunt, dehydrated, and starving to the point of near death, and he insisted that he was lost not for 2 days, but 9. He had also carefully kept journal entries with the rise and the set of the sun, and indeed he had made 9 of them. Exhaustion and confusion clearly played a factor in augmenting Brown's story, and of course, after a hard winter, there's no record of how dehydrated and starved Brown may have been before getting lost. Later expeditions into the Stillwood showed that the forest floor is incredibly thick with vegetation, with tall, rail-thin trees making most passages exceedingly difficult. Add to this 3 similar curving creeks and streams flowing off the Etheria. The sound dampening of trees and foliage, sometimes so thick that it blocks the sky, and you have a recipe for losing one's way quite easily. However, the Stillwood still carries the stigma of being invisibly endless. The legend of the Stillwood King started, interestingly enough, almost immediately after Brown's return. Contrary to popular belief, it was not Brown's story that evolved him into the spooky figure of legend as time passed, but his experience probably did inspire it. Historians believe either teachers at a schoolhouse bordering the Stillwood or parents of the attending children cooked up the legend to keep kids from wandering into the dangerous woods and getting lost. Legend says that Brown was not the first person to get lost in the Stillwood, but another man entered its wooded labyrinth hundreds of years before. Time doesn't work in the Stillwood the same way it does outside of it, and the longer you're trapped, the longer it seems, even if you've only been gone a few days in the real world. That first victim became a permanent part of Stillwood. He never found his way back home, and should have starved to death. But the Stillwood wouldn't let its king die, so it slowed his crawl into his heart along with the rest of him. They say it beats once per day, and that he can't move more than a foot in an hour. When he's alone, that is. His clothes are ragged and torn, and he looks more like a bone-white cadaver than a man. He screams and cries for help, but no one outside can hear him. And over the centuries, his screams have become silent. And as he stalks among the dead leaves in exhaustion, praying for death to come, the Stillwood becomes a little more a part of him. His blood is creek water and moss, and his skin is the color of mushroom caps. They say if you ever find yourself in the Stillwood, you have to be careful where you look. You see, the fact that no one sees him is what disconnected the Stillwood King from the normal passage of time. He is as slow and silent as the Stillwood himself. That is, until your eyes fall upon him. You may catch a sliver of white through a stand of trees, thinking it to be a crop of mushrooms growing up the side of an oak tree. But it's the king. If it is the king, you'll see that white shape spin around instantly, revealing two sunken black eyes and a saw-edged mouth locked in a scream. Then you will hear him. Now he will be quick and loud and all the things he can't be when no one else is there. He has been waiting for this for a long time, and while you are looking at him, he'll move with all the pent-up time the Stillwood has stolen from him, has saved for him, and he will be upon you almost faster than you can blink. Almost, legend says. So, if you see what looks like a crop of mushrooms as tall as a man in the distance, don't stop to think. Don't run. Do nothing except shut your eyes. The Stillwood King already knows you're there, and the forest is no obstacle to him when he's fast. He may now be only inches from you. But if you've shut your eyes in time, that's where he'll stay. Turn completely around with your eyes still shut tight, and pray that he wasn't fast enough to run behind you in that blink. Now, feel your way through the forest, around the thin, close, brittle trees, and over the dead leaves, which will seem oddly quiet. In case he has positioned himself for you to come to him, change direction just once. Don't open your eyes until you've gone at least the same distance as the king was from you when you first saw him. With luck, you'll leave him trapped again. His heart beating once a day, his movement only a foot an hour. But if, with your eyes shut, you slowly press against a wet, shambling thing that smells like moss and creek water and feels like mushroom caps, open your eyes. So it will be quick.
Yeah. Okay. Hello there. We went through 7 stories in a very short span of time. By the way, hi there, newcomer. Welcome to the home grove. Nuriakia? Love me some Straub. Yeah, Straub this is actually very good. I have not experienced the rating until you have suggested it to me doing the grass, by the way. Thank you very much. But yeah, I enjoyed these. I love stories like this. Just the unexplained. You humans do so love to think that the world is just this sure thing of variables. And then the world likes to prove you wrong. So, Nuria Kea, if you're still here, hi, welcome to the Home Grove. My name is Calcifer Santelmo. I am a fire elemental of the Philippine Islands, and I am technically, actually, I guess, a creature of the like of these stories myself. And yeah, we were doing SCP. That was the first 3 stories we did, specifically about the Antimemetics Division and the story of Marion Wheeler, who, by the way, is a stone cold badass, as Dew on the Grass would love to tell you. Do forgive me if you, well, nothing to forgive. I suppose I can't apologize for something that is outside both of our control. But yeah, you unfortunately missed the first half of this stream, which was all SCP stories, of which we then moved on to a story which was called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. And then we moved on to some Straub, 3 stories by Straub, which are 20 Minutes in the Dark, They're 3 miles up a narrow dirt road, and the Stillwood King. Now, I did say that these are the only stories we'd be reading for the night, but I mean, usually we end at midnight, is the thing. So I'm wondering, like, if Nuria Kea is still here, which I hope you are. If you're not, well, it was nice to have you here for a bit. Ooh, but so far, how was that? Before we make any kind of decisions, how was that for you guys? You enjoy that? I know I saw Max had to go, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Max, for those sparks that you left before you decided to make off with before you left. I appreciate it greatly, as always. Doing the grass, I would like to appreciate and express my gratitude for you as well for suggesting all of these great stories. I thoroughly enjoyed reading through all of these, and again, these are all blind readings on my end. I've literally not read these before, so loved all of these. Yeah, we might make this. I'm for sure. I kind of want to make this a more often thing, and we'll try to see if there's stories on the internet that aren't just like pure horror. Although I absolutely do enjoy SCPs. I really enjoy SCPs. Especially if they're like anti-mimetic, like damn. That was a really good time for me. But yeah, I'm wondering, is there a quick thing we can end with? Like a quick little SCP short you guys want to end with? We got time, I think. In my opinion, we got time. Oh, you got one? Make it short. I feel a little bad because I don't think we technically read a creepypasta tonight. We read a lot of internet horror stories, but we technically didn't read a creepypasta. Whoops. Still, I suppose it all falls under the umbrella of like internet horror. Which maybe the fans of the online horror community can forgive me in this case. Alright, so what you got for us, Do? Yeah, no, Christian was pretty creepypasta. I'm looking at it, it's pretty creepypasta. Fiction. I mean, I love the name of the site, Chainsaw Suit. So I'm guessing these three are all part of like an Icar Falls. Yeah, they are all a part of Icar Falls, which is pretty interesting looking at it. I wonder. I'll try and check out everything that's in there. And let's see if it's, I don't know, it seems interesting. It's you know, Gravity Falls, except it's not a silly little cartoon. Cartoon for kids, full of jokes for kids, as Alex Hirsch says. I am looking at these other things, right? One that interests me with his title almost immediately is Curious Little Thing. Yeah. And I wonder, because it's short. But yeah, we might save that for another time, actually. Let's get one last of these SCPs, and if you got something from the Antimimetics Division to end it with, oh, you put it in suggestions. Right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Alright, let's see what we got. Wheeler's God. Ayo? Marion Wheeler, huh? Of course we have to end with the Stone Cold Badass herself, right? What other way would we end? Oh man. Wait, why is this in a separate... Oh, so this is Quantum's, this is Quantum's. Okay. Alright, this is good. This looks like a good thing to end. Alright, kids. Children listening for the fire, for those of you who are still here. Unfortunately, I don't think I had prepared a projection for this one. I don't think I prepared an image I can project onto the fire for this one, so you're gonna have to contend with looking at my, my face. Well, face is the vague approximation of what this is. We'll say face. Well, before we do that, yeah. Teaser for the next act. Oh, wait. Teaser for the next act. Oh my. So I'm guessing that's gonna be in your requests for the next horror reading stream. I mean, I certainly enjoyed it, so I have no complaint. So deleted scene that didn't quite fit into one of the chapters, but is fun regardless. Interesting. Alright, let's get to it then. Oh, wait, something is wrong. Why? Wait a minute. Something is wrong. Never mind. Okay. I moved the goals on the accident at the bottom. That's my beef. So yeah, let's go with this. Wheeler's God by Quantum, a part of the Antimemetics Division series. Yeah, it immediately opens with a word I cannot pronounce. Fun. Give you a second here. Alright, let's go. Cyclomenophage is the word Dr. Alan Stover invented to describe SCP-8473. And Marion Wheeler wishes he hadn't. She feels this every time she rereads SCP-8473's entry. Run-on sentences, invented terminology without clear definitions, experimental logs made bafflingly obtuse by the omission of crucial details. Stover is still out there, circulating somewhere in the Greater Foundation, one of the few people to exit the Antimemetics Division alive and secure other work. A fine researcher and a lovely person, and a powerhouse of anthropological knowledge. The man simply could not write. SCP-8473 is the ancient Johorian demigod of forgetting how to ride a bicycle, interned since prehistory in a meter-tall, heavily worn graven idol. It is talkative, laid back, dirtily funny, and strangely compelling company. The idol stands immobile on a short plinth, lit from above by a subdued yellow-orange spotlights, which throw its heavily analyzed engravings into sharper relief. SCP-8473 speaks from it, apparently directly agitating the air near the idol's surface to do so. You need to take a month off in Barbados starting today, SCP-8473 tells Wheeler, or you're going to explode like a guitar string. Wheeler slouches unhappily in a chair on the far side of the room, staring at nothing, really. This is not a part of any scheduled experiment, and the recorders are off. She's on her break. When SCP-8473 speaks, its intended meaning is always perfectly clear to all present. But the rendered vocalizations only make up about half of what it says. There's a faint telepathic side channel. This means that written transcripts of its speech never come out quite right, according to anybody who was there at the time. It's something to do with godhood, but research into the fine details has proven unrewarding. So when it says guitar and the word guitar is what appears in the vibrations of the air and on the audio recordings on the transcript, Wheeler knows, in deep-veined shared memories sort of way, that it doesn't mean a guitar, it means a sapé, a Malaysian stringed instrument similar to a lute. I don't have time to go on a vacation, she says. SCP-8473 asks, do you drink? Anybody else Wheeler would punch for asking this question. Punch, or if they worked for her, fire. But then, when was the last time she spoke to someone who didn't work for her? Someone outside of work. A shop? She must have visited a supermarket from time to time, right? She must get food somehow. She axes this line of thinking. I don't drink. Well, I don't remember the last time that I drank. Would you remember, though? Maybe. I have a cellar. There's a refrigerator down there, and I know for a fact that there's champagne in the refrigerator, waiting for a special occasion. What special occasion? At length, Wheeler discovers that she can't answer this question. Instead, she says, I don't drink. I can't. I smoke. Anything good? Tobacco. Nicotine, Wheeler says. She rummages in her suit jackets in her pocket and waves a cigarette packet. SCP-8473 has no face. It's a block of rock. Still, it is plainly clear that it is revulsed. Ah, Saya, you can do better than that. I need to keep my head clear. I'm on call every minute of the year. We're so short-staffed, there's no one else. What if something breaks containment while I'm elsewhere? What if a ZZ**K class scenario breaks out? I'll take care of it, SCP-8473 says. Wheeler almost laughs, but turns into a long hacking cough. Based on radiometric dating of the rock and a humiliating amount of wild guesswork, SCP-8473 has existed for at least 17,000 years. What it did during the millennia between its birth and the invention of the first actual bicycle is a matter of strident debate. The Foundation's collective opinion is that SCP-8473 did nothing, and probably did not have its current form. In SCP-8473's own version of events, the bicycle was invented a dozen times in all parts of the globe since prehistory, only for SCP-8473 to engulf, consume, and negate all human knowledge not only of riding the bicycle, but the mechanism of the bicycle, before lapsing back into dormancy. A periodic process bicycle cycle. The Foundation's version goes on to note that there is literally zero archaeological or historical evidence to support SCP-8473's version of events. SCP-8473's version goes on much further so, but by this point, the Foundation's version has become exasperated and gone to look for aspirin. 8473's only confirmed anomalous property is its capacity to sometimes eat the part of a person's memory where they remember how to ride a bike. The process is painless and instantaneous. They have to go and learn again, which for adults is generally relatively easy. Other than that, and the fact that it's a semi-telepathic talking rock, which Foundation weirdness standards doesn't even move the needle, SCP-8473 can't do anything. It's not a powerful entity. It is, in fact, the least powerful god on the Foundation's books. Wheeler, then, considers its capacity to personally deal with any kind of existential threat to humanity comical. Wheeler is sure as hell a theist. A polytheist at that. She believes in all the gods and all the devils and all the destinations, and she has even seen a few of them. But she would not say she has a religion. To observe a religion would feel too much like taking sides in an unbearably complex, high-stakes conflict. Another one, that is. One too many. But sometimes she exists in a culture which is like this. She finds herself using turns of phrase like, oh my god, and when she catches herself doing that, she retcons her own meaning to be this god. Her god is SCP-8473. Is that enough for a faith? A squirrely, pointless little faith in an immobile, ineffectual god she visits on her breaks, who basically only listens, except for when it gives bad advice. It says again, I'll take care of it. You need to relax. The inside of your skull is a prison cell, and you need to get out. It gives her a commandment. Go home and drink that champagne. The whole bottle. Become incapable and unbalanced. Do this in my honor. What's the occasion? I give in. I can't think of one. The occasion is that the world hasn't fucking ended, SCP-8473 replies. That is actually almost good enough. I'll think about it, Wheeler says. She gets up to leave. I need an actual cigarette now. Stay! Smoke in here! I can't. There are tedious geochemical contamination reasons and American workplace law. Take it easy. It shouts after her. And get laid! Miss Wheeler! Miss Wheeler! Wheeler closes the door just too late. Someone is running up to meet her outside the containment unit. Wheeler recognizes her as Dr. Eli Moreno, a trainee field researcher who joined the Antimemetics Division only 6 months ago. It looks like Moreno had a question, but she has become confused and distracted by a different one. Did SCP-8473 just tell you to get laid? Yes, Wheeler replies levelly. Can I help you with something? Three things that threw me off. There are 3 things that threw me off with this thing. 1, 8473 is probably Southeast Asian in origin. For 3 reasons. One, the sape, it's Malaysian, right? That's Southeast Asian. But it's also that she said sayang. That is a Filipino word. Sayang is a word in Filipino that means, like, that says, it's basically an expression that says, what a waste. And it makes sense for her to say, for the SCP to say it. Because, you know, like, oh, what a waste. But it could also be Indonesian, because sayang in Indonesian means darling. So I don't know which it is, but It is. This thing is very clearly from Southeast Asia somewhere, because it references a Malay instrument, either a Filipino or Indonesian language, and then the doctor at the bottom, Eli Moreno. Moreno is very much a Filipino name. I mean, it's it's a name, it's a last name that's found also in Hispanic families and Hispanic people, but in Southeast Asia, that's Filipino. So I wonder, is this coincidence? Did you know this on purpose, dude? Was this on purpose? Did you know that this was vaguely Southeast Asian? Because I appreciate that. I will wait for your answer as I water some of the plants. And by the way, I have turned on blurbs again. And I will do it myself.
Hello there.
It threw me off when I read it. I think you could hear me pause because I was like, wait, what? Because it's a word in my language. Well, one of my languages. It's a word in one of my languages, so I was like, wait a minute. That surprised me. But yeah, I think that's a good way to end it. And you know what? It was short. We are ending right before midnight. This was fun. I love this. I do love horror story readings. I gotta say, my favorites were either the end of the Antimimetic Division, or during the part of I Have No Mouth, the program that popped up. That was a spur of the moment decision that Pyre decided to get involved in, and I still greatly appreciate it. How was that, by the way? Did that surprise you? The sudden pop up of hate. I knew it couldn't be me that said it, you know? Whew. This was an interesting one. Oh my god. That made me jump and it was awesome. Yeah, no, that was the point. That was kind of the point. Because, I don't know, whenever I've read this story, whenever I imagine AM... Ooh, we discover who is Adam? Well, at some point, she mentioned to the person who taught her, the original Antimimetics founder, that her name changed, right? Hey Max, welcome back. We're about to end actually, so thanks for coming back towards the end. I really appreciate it. But yeah, what did you miss? We read one last SCP story, just for the hell of it, so we can end usually on time at 12. So the thing that's funny to me, yeah, I'm sorry, but thank you for coming here on general. We're winding down now, and we were talking about that moment during I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, where I scared all of you with the pop-up robot. But yeah, as for the who is Adam, I feel like, is that not her husband? Because I feel like it's family, because at some point it was referenced that her name was Hutchinson, but now it's Wheeler. So either her name was changed for reasons of private security, which I doubt, considering the fact that most people don't even know she exists, or it's her husband because they married and she took his last name. Alternatively, it could be a child, because apparently she had a child that died, so who knows? Hopefully, wherever Adam is, he's okay, and we'll find out next time, on Dragon Ball Z. Next time on Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. We do go with 5555. If I remember correctly, I think I remember a mention of someone named Adam in 5555 the last time we did this. But I didn't actually read through it. I just looked a little bit and decided, oh, we'll do this in order. So yeah, that is basically the end of the stream. I like this. I enjoyed this. I would be glad to do this again. Probably not next week, because next week is pretty packed already in terms of streams, which I will discuss to you now. So on Wednesday, the first half of the week is going to be pretty blank. But unless I decide to randomly stream on a Monday or Tuesday. But on Thank you so much, Max. But on Wednesday, we actually have D&D. We have a D&D stream going on around the same time, 8 our time, Southeast Asia time, with Pyre, T, and Grand Admiral Uehara. So they're all great friends from our shared Discord, and just friends that we... Sad thing, I don't know much stories, and the ones I know need too much things to see before. Oh, that's fine. We'll try. We'll see what we can do, you know? But yeah, you have your D&D on Wednesdays, and then on Thursdays, I'm going to be streaming with Kiwi, Whis, and Spider Lily. Same times as usual. And Friday, we finally get to a space for the Unbound because Pyre is back from the dead. He didn't actually die. I made a joke about how Pyre died. He didn't die. He just, you know, he was just occupied. But yeah. Well, obviously he's alive. He made that program for us in like a few hours. Less than, actually. Very impressive. I just watched him freak out. Stop it. You did not kill him. I gotta know what your obsession is with killing Pyre, by the way, eventually. Brava, bravissima. Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Don't be afraid to leave, yeah. Actually, may I ask, would you guys be interested in, like, outright horror games? Or do you prefer readings? Because I don't mind doing either. I just need to know if, like, you know, it's something that you guys actually want. Because I can play stuff I want all the time. And what I want will likely influence the final decision regardless. But I still like to ask, you know, insights from other people, just for the hell of it. So don't be afraid to tell me. In the stream suggestions, you know, don't be afraid to suggest games. Don't be afraid to suggest little more stories and things like that. But for now, we are actually going to go. Let me check real quick who's streaming right now. Well, no one I know is really streaming right now, which is weird because it's Saturday night, but I guess they have better things to do on a Saturday night, to be honest. Good for them. Alright. I guess that means we're ending it here then. We're ending it with me. So let me just do this, let me just say this to all of you. Thank you so much for being here, whether you arrived at the start, got here towards the middle, or maybe towards the end. Your presence is wait, who is this? You want me to check them out? I can check them out real quick. Are they streaming? No maidens. Oh, they're doing Elden Ring, I see. Okay, you know what? Heck yeah. You know what? Because you said so. Because you said so. This is your raid message. Let me just get your raid message ready. Because they're playing Elden Ring, let me just okay, what is the name of that you know what? Yeah, okay, because they're playing Elden Ring, this is your raid message. Oh god. Flame Sling, which is a spell. It's a fire spell in Elden Ring for those of you who have not played the game. And this is your emoji. Not the fire at the end. That's an accidental click. So yeah, go say hi to them. Go watch them. I hope you enjoy their stuff. Moa is more. Interesting name. Flame Sling, yeah, Flame Sling. Love to see it. Oh, it's rated, it's intended for mature audience. Good night, friends. Salamat po sa pagdalo nyo sa tahanang kakahuyan. I will see you next time. I'm gonna go on a walk after saying hi to this very nice person.
Flame sling, hello raiders. Let me say a proper hello to y'all. What are you doing?
This chat is now mine.
It is? What? Max? So confident in thinking this chat is now yours. What are you gonna do with this power, huh?